Rastafari. Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. Shout out to everyone in the live chat. Let me know if you can hear me loud and clear. We got a lot to talk about today. This is going to be a marathon show because there are so many boxing stories that need to be covered here. Shout out to Matt early with a super chat. He says, I'm very upset with the Tank Jake Paul fight, but it's the only time since Tyson where my family and friends actually asked me about my thoughts on boxing, so maybe it's good for the sport. It's an exhibition bout. And exhibition bouts, are they good or bad for the sport? They don't go on somebody's record, but I guess we're talking about the eyes that it draws to boxing, and that means a lot of casual fans, as you say, friends and family who are maybe not really into boxing. Do they know that this is just an exhibition bout and not a real bout? Are they aware of that? If not, they need to be aware of that because casual boxing fans have to know the difference between a proper boxing fight and, an exhibition, a circus fight, however you want to describe it. Because if they know it's just an exhibition, just a circus fight, then no matter what happens in the fight, they can't really be disappointed or put off boxing because they are supposed to know what they were getting themselves into. But I don't know how many of the casuals realize that it's a joke fight. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, aside from that, boxing hasn't been this lit in a long time. I'm so excited for the November 22nd card. It's the best I've seen in 20 years. Yeah, we'll come on to that. Big up, Matt, for the super chat. Every time, Matt Borgerson. Okay, JR says I'm loud and clear. Yes, big up, Matt. Sound good? All good. So, loads to talk about. This will probably be the most marathon boxing live stream I've done in terms of the number of stories we're going to talk about here. And we will talk about the Jake Paul Tank Davis exhibition, amongst other things. Shout out to Matt. He says, it's wild to me that Beterbiev is an opener for a pay-per-view card. That's insanity. We'll also come on to his fight. We'll talk about Artur. I came well prepared for this stream. We'll talk about Beterbiev's fight, and indeed, he is way down the card. But to be fair, even though he is a big name, he is fighting somebody that can't lace his boots, basically. So, I'm going to start off with this. Francis Warren, the manager of Moses Itauma, did this interview on TalkSport earlier on today. And I was happy to hear him say that he's not going to rush Moses Itauma. And they shouldn't rush him because the chance to break Mike Tyson's record and become the youngest heavyweight champion in history, is gone now. So if that record is gone, then what exactly is the incentive to rush to a title shot? Also, when I was advocating for Itauma to try and break Mike Tyson's record, I was doing so on the condition that he fight for, let's say, a vacant belt, or maybe fight Daniel Dubois, not fight Alexander Usyk. And I said that if he were to win the belt and break Mike Tyson's record, he should then vacate it and continue his development. Because once you become champion, you're obligated to fight the best, as far as I'm concerned. Now, a lot of people didn't like me saying that. They said, why should he get the credit of breaking Mike Tyson's record if he's not going to be a real champion and if he's going to vacate the belt? Well, I'll explain why. Moses Itauma now is at 13 fights. If he had fought, let's say, Daniel Dubois, if there was a vacant belt earlier on in the year for him to break Mike Tyson's record, the deadline was in May. At the time, he would have had, 11 or 12 fights? Well, look at Mike Tyson here when he challenged Trevor Berbick for the world heavyweight title at the age of 20. Trevor Berbick isn't even in the same universe as Alexander Usyk in terms of quality of fighter. Not in the same universe. Yet and still, Tyson had 27 fights by the time he fought Trevor Berbick. Think about the experience. He'd been the distance. When I say the distance, I'm talking about he'd been 10 rounds twice. 27 fights before he challenged Trevor Berbick, who, let's be real, was one of the weaker heavyweight champions in history. If Mike Tyson, one of the greatest fighters ever, in the heavyweight division at least, has 27 fights, that's how much experience his team got him before they put him in with Berbick. If he's having 27 fights before they'll even put him in with Berbick, why must Itauma, who's only had 13 fights, go in with Usyk? You see what I'm saying? Make it make sense. It don't make sense. Itauma should not be rushed to that fight. Usyk is an awful lot better than Trevor Berbick, and Itauma hasn't had anywhere near 27 bouts. Mike Tyson was lucky during his day that it was a weak division, just being real. You had Trevor Berbick, Bone Crusher Smith, and Tony Tucker as champions. It was a weak era. He was lucky on that front, and he was also lucky because his team was so well connected and the heavyweight landscape was such that he was able to fight more than once a month, in some occasions twice a month in his first 2 years as a pro, to build up all that experience and therefore stand him in good stead going in, challenging Trevor Berbick for the heavyweight title in what would have been his 28th bout. So, context, Itauma needs to take his time. The names that people are throwing out there are the likes of Filip Hrgović, Jermaine Franklin. Some people have even said the likes of Zheli Zhang, Martin Bakoli, so on and so forth. Now, his manager, Francis Warren, said he doesn't think those guys are going to get Itauma rounds. So he didn't really specify who he plans to put Itauma in with next, but he did say he's not going to rush him, which, again, to me is a good thing. No need to. The Mike Tyson record's not there anymore, so take your time, build him at a sensible rate, and the Warrens have always been good at that. Frank Warren, I have to imagine, has some input, but Francis, the son, has been involved in boxing for a very long time as well. So that's my take on that. And interestingly, the main opponent that people are putting forward for Itauma next at the back end of this year is Filip Hrgović. But Hrgović suffered a cut against David Adeleye, so that probably rules him out. The name I was looking for Itauma to face before the end of the year was Jermaine Franklin, but apparently he's ruled out now as well. We'll come on to it later because he's going to be on the undercard of Canelo Crawford, believe it or not, against Ivan Ditchko. Ivan Ditchko was a pretty successful amateur. He fought Anthony Joshua and many other people in the unpaid ranks. His professional career has been progressing very, very slowly. I'm not quite sure why. I think he's still unbeaten. But yeah, he's fighting Jermaine Franklin on the Canelo Crawford undercard. So that surely rules him out. So who is there for Itauma? Maybe Martin Bakoli before the end of the year. But is that too soon for him? If Bakoli turns up in shape, fully motivated, will he get done in the way Jared Anderson got done in? I think he's better than Anderson. But Martin Bakoli, again, when he's on it, is a different kettle of fish to, let's say, Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte was totally washed. Let's be real. So, yeah, that's my take on the situation with Moses Itauma. And there's some more Itauma news here as well. So Eddie Hearn did this interview with IFL TV the other day. And he was asked by Kugan Cassius whether Itauma is as good or better as Anthony Joshua was after, whatever it is, 13 fights. And surprisingly to me, because Eddie Hearn is obviously Anthony Joshua's promoter, and he always backs AJ no matter what, surprisingly, Eddie Hearn said, Itauma is a better natural talent than Anthony Joshua. Now, many of us already think that, so it's no surprise that other people would share the same view. It's just a surprise to me that Eddie Hearn would come out and say such a thing. because fighters have egos. Fighters can be easily upset. And for Eddie, who normally backs Anthony Joshua to the hilt, to come out and say, yeah, well, let's just face it, Itauma's a better natural talent than Anthony Joshua. I wonder how AJ feels about that. Maybe AJ told him that himself behind the scenes. Maybe he's already given Eddie Hearn permission to say that this Itauma kid is far better than I was coming through. Because to me, that's obvious. Itauma has quicker hands, quicker feet. He just looks more natural 13 fights in. Obviously much younger than Anthony Joshua was when AJ turned pro. But we're talking about the stage of the professional career, 13 fights in. Itauma looks way more advanced. And I've been asked this question several times in previous live streams. You know, who do I think was better after whatever it was, 5 fights, 10 fights, 13 fights. And each and every time I said Moses Itauma was better than Anthony Joshua, as far as my eyes can see, at the same stage. He's a more natural talent. He does things more technically correct. He's faster, particularly with the feet, but as well as the hands as well. And he just seems more poised than AJ. Not that AJ was necessarily all over the place in his early career, but certainly in the Dillian Whyte fight he was. So, yeah, what do you guys think of this? Eddie Hearn coming out and admitting that Itauma is better than a young Anthony Joshua. Again, it's not going to be a surprise to any of you guys in terms of other people out there having that view, because I'm sure many of you have that same view. But Eddie Hearn saying it. Is this an indication that Anthony Joshua really is very close to the end? Has he given up? Because the fact that Anthony Joshua was entertaining this Jake Paul fight rather than fighting a legitimate fighter, even if it's just a journeyman for a little, confidence builder. The fact he's going down the Jake Paul route, okay, there's a lot of money involved, but it just shows me that he's not as ambitious as he was anymore. Same with Tank Davis, right? Tank Davis was supposed to be fighting this rematch with Lamont Roach. Instead, he's fighting a YouTuber, Jake Paul. How much ambition can he possibly have? Well, we've known for a long time that Tank Davis doesn't have that much ambition, right? So throw it over to you guys. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, Moses Itauma has shown us, even though he has gone so few rounds, more potential than Mike Tyson, in my opinion. He's less limited and has more in his arsenal. Just has to pass the chin test, honestly. Big up, Matt. I think that Itauma is a prodigy. Absolutely he is. Mike Tyson was a prodigy too. Mike Tyson at least went the distance, though, a couple times before he challenged for the title, so we knew he had stamina and a chin. Itauma hasn't yet shown whether he can take a shot or not, and we haven't yet seen his stamina. Mike Tyson was also asked some questions in certain fights coming through. So in the Jesse Ferguson fight early on, he was asked some questions. In the James Tillis fight, which was competitive early on, he was asked some questions. He got hit some good shots, body shots. Very few people went to Mike Tyson's body. James Tillis hit him with body shots. And Mike Tyson said after that fight, I think he was in the lobby or somewhere where fans were coming to talk to him after the fact, and he said he couldn't stand up because his waist was hurting so much from the body shots that James Tillis had hit him with. So Mike Tyson passed certain gut checks. I mean, not extreme gut checks, but, a certain level for a prospect coming through, a young kid, 19, 20, which Itauma has not yet passed. And I'd like to see him in those kind of fights to prepare him for the world level contest that he'll inevitably be involved in. So, yeah, that's my take on it. As far as Itauma being less limited, well, Itauma's got more dimensions to his game in the fact that he jumps in and out of the pocket. He's not a guy that just only has a forward gear like Mike Tyson, but Mike Tyson was a very dynamic pressure fighter. He's one of the most dynamic pressure fighters I've seen. Maybe the most dynamic pressure fighter I've seen. So most pressure fighters are fairly rudimentary. Mike Tyson was quite complicated as a pressure fighter. Did a lot of counter punching on the front foot, would switch up the angles. Sometimes he'd go southpaw. He would lead with either hand. He would come at you jabbing. He was that head movement. He was very explosive. So, yeah, he was a pressure fighter. Didn't really have a back foot at all, Mike Tyson. Whereas Itauma, I mean, we haven't seen a... No, actually, we have seen a back foot. I've seen Itauma in some of his earlier fights moving around and allowing an opponent to come onto him a little bit. So, yeah, he probably has a more dimensional style than Mike Tyson because the Customato style was pretty one-dimensional, although Floyd Patterson did box on the back foot here and there, but Mike Tyson wasn't really capable of it. So I get your point. Big up, Matt. Shout out to Mr. Luca for the super chat. He says, what should Turkey do with boxing going forward? Ring pass with 12 main shows, maybe 12 next-gen shows, then maybe 4 shows a year on Netflix. Well, in terms of what he should do, it depends on the perspective. What I would like him to do is abandon DAZN completely and put everything on Netflix. That's what I would like to do. Reason being, I am not comfortable with a lot of DAZN's business practices in terms of the way they treat their customers. And the reach on Netflix is so much bigger. Netflix has got, 60 million subscribers or something crazy? So DAZN doesn't have that kind of reach. So it's better for boxing in terms of exposure for the Ring Magazine cards to be on Netflix. So that's what I would like to happen. I think that's what would be best. But Turkey's got a stake in DAZN. He owns 10%, 20% or something. So he's unlikely, I would have thought anyway, to abandon them completely. As far as the Ring Pass 12 main shows, for the price point that they're talking about, which I think is like $30 or £30, that's been thrown out there, they're going to need to provide real value if they're charging £30 or $13 a month, $30 a month, excuse me. They need to provide real value. So it's not just a matter of doing 12 shows. They need to be quality shows. I'm not saying they need to be as insanely stacked as some of the Ring Magazine Riyadh season cards in the past, but they still need to be a solid show each and every time. It can't be a show where we're like, oh, come on, man. No, it can't get that kind of reaction from us. It must be a solid show every time with some exceptional shows thrown in there. Maybe at least, let's say if they're going to do 12 shows a year, 4 of them need to be exceptional at the very least, and the rest need to be solid. Do you know what I mean? So that's what I would say with Turkey moving forward. But in terms of mixing it up, that would also be good. If he's not going to abandon DAZN, Turkey Al-Sheikh, at least, as you say, put some shows on Netflix. There's one with Terence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez coming up. Hopefully it's not a one-off. Hopefully we get to see more Turkey Al-Sheikh shows on that platform. But what do you think, Mr. Luca? Big up G-Man in the live chat. J2K says, Moses Itauma's style is very similar to the young Cassius Clay. I disagree. I don't really think his style's like that. A young Cassius Clay as he was then, later on Muhammad Ali, was less technically correct. And he moved on the back foot a lot more lateral movement than Itauma. Itauma moves in and out, side to side a little bit, but Ali was like bouncing all over the ring, you know? So I don't really see the comparison there. But he certainly got athleticism. And obviously a young Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali had great athleticism as well. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, the last Jake Paul undercard was actually fantastic. The fights on it were really good. I love the Jake Paul undercards. There are legit fights on it. That's actually true. Jake Paul has put some good fights on his undercard, to be fair. And it's just as well because the main events are usually stinkers, right? The Mike Tyson fight was a stinker. The Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. fight was a stinker. So, yeah, he needs to put some legit fights on the undercard to compensate for the main events, which often don't deliver, especially as he's stepping up his level of competition. When he was fighting old MMA fighters like Askren and those guys, he was getting knockouts. But as he started stepping it up, Well, not as many knockouts, right? In fact, when was the last time Jake Paul got a knockout? You guys let me know. There might have been somebody who I forgot, who's slipped my mind. But yeah, shout out to Matt for the super chat. Mike Perry, apparently. Matt Borgerson says, my sparring partner, Julian Rodriguez, won his bout on there. Okay. Mike Perry. When was the Mike Perry fight? Star Fox says, wait, they're dropping pay-per-views for a £30 per month subscription. At least you could choose which pay-per-views you bought. Indeed, but obviously putting on a load of pay-per-views every year is, if you were to buy all the pay-per-views, it's a lot more expensive than the £30 a month subscription, I think. Depending on how many pay-per-views they put on per year. Let's say they put on 5 big pay-per-views. Actually, no. It's more expensive, isn't it? Because the pay-per-views were like, what? Were any of them £30? Some of them were at least 25. So that's 100 if you're putting on 4 good ones. Let's, for argument's sake, say it's 5 good ones. That's £125. Wow, it's actually more. But I think you can still dip in and dip out for 1 month, can't you? Or are you locked in for a year? Because if you can still dip in and dip out for a month, it kind of defeats the purpose. You absolutely are bang on the money there. But I think for the £30, you get everything, though. Or do you only get the Riyadh season cards? Can somebody tell me in the live chat if they know? Star Fox says $360 a year to start. That's the DAZN price. Then the DAZN price increases after 6 months. Anyway, let's move on from Anthony Joshua and Moses Itauma for now. Again, the story on screen, which I was referring to, is Eddie Hearn in a recent interview saying that Itauma is a better natural talent, a more natural talent than Anthony Joshua. Again, many of us think that anyway. It's just surprising to hear AJ's own promoter admitting it. Now, actually going back to Anthony Joshua for a second, Tommy Fury did this interview on the Stomping Ground the other day, and he was asked about this potential Anthony Joshua-Jake Paul fight, which at the time when he did the interview was still in negotiations, and he basically laughed it off. He said, it's ridiculous, it's a farce, I'm paraphrasing here. If I can beat Jake Paul, imagine what Anthony Joshua would do to him. Anthony Joshua would absolutely destroy him unless he's been paid to take a dive. So he was expecting a complete mismatch, and this is a guy that's beaten Jake Paul. And this is a guy who normally doesn't have much good to say about Anthony Joshua because he's Tyson Fury, a.k.a. Luke Partridge's brother. And even he was saying it's a total mismatch, it's a joke fight. So it did amaze me that there were people out there saying that, oh, Jake Paul's got a chance against AJ. AJ's chinny. Was Jake Paul even serious about making the fight? I don't know. If he was serious about making the fight, maybe he was pushing for it to be an exhibition, or maybe he was just totally delusional. Maybe he's just surrounded by too many casuals who gassed his head up. But I want to show you guys something here. This is a picture of Jake Paul standing next to Francis Ngannou. On the left, obviously. Look at the size of Ngannou compared to Jake Paul. Look at his shoulders. Look at his head. Bear in mind, Ngannou is actually shorter than Anthony Joshua. And look what Anthony Joshua did to Francis Ngannou. I'm telling you people, Jake Paul couldn't beat Francis Ngannou. And I know styles make fights, but for me, The AJ Jake Paul fight was such a grotesque mismatch that, as I say, I was amazed that anybody thought that it would be remotely competitive or that Jake Paul could go in there and win the fight. I mean, come on. He couldn't even beat Tommy Fury. Yeah, he's maybe improved a little bit since then, but not enough to get in there and beat an Anthony Joshua, albeit an over-the-hill Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua knows more about boxing than Jake Paul. Anthony Joshua has forgotten more about boxing than Jake Paul has ever known. So, Jake Paul versus Ngannou wouldn't be something that Jake Paul would entertain. Because that's a more natural fight to make, since they're both novices, right? Since Jake Paul likes fighting these ex-MMA guys, why not call out Ngannou? I'm sure Ngannou would be up for it. But instead he calls out the guy who knocked out Ngannou in 2 rounds. Something isn't right with this picture. Doesn't it make more sense? Isn't it more Jake Paul's thing to call out an ex-MMA guy to keep stepping up the level of MMA guys that he's fighting in a boxing context? Why didn't he call out? Maybe he has called out Ngannou in the past, but how far did negotiations go? Is it something you guys reckon Ngannou wouldn't be up for? I reckon he would be, especially at this stage of his career. And just look at the size difference. Bear in mind, Anthony Joshua is taller than Ngannou is. That fight would have been a grotesque mismatch. Yeah? And instead, Jake Paul is fighting Tank Davis, a lightweight, in an exhibition. So, yeah. Tommy Fury, the one and only man to beat Jake Paul so far in his professional career, said that Anthony Joshua would absolutely destroy him. It's a joke. If I can beat Jake Paul, imagine what AJ would do to him. If the fight goes more than 2 minutes, I'm paraphrasing again, but Tommy Fury said if the fight goes more than 2 minutes between AJ and Jake Paul, AJ's been paid off. That's what he said. All right, so let's move on to this Jake Paul Tank Davis fight then. So this was the tweet that went out, or the Instagram post. No, it's a tweet, excuse me. Ring Magazine, breaking news. Jake Paul will face Gervonta Tank Davis on November 15th at State Farm Arena in Atlanta, GA, in an exhibition live on Netflix. Sources confirm to Mike Coppinger. Talks for Paul to face Anthony Joshua collapsed over network issues. Okay, is that what it was? Do I think Jake Paul was ever serious? He'd have to be very delusional to be serious. Anyway, Paul's last fight took place at, well, it says something else there, which I didn't. Actually, this was somebody else that took the screenshot, not me, so I'm not sure what it says in the show more tab. But anyway, we've got the information we need. It's an exhibition, so it's not going to go on either man's record, the result of the fight that is. But who do you think insisted on it being an exhibition? Do you think it was Jake Paul's idea for it to be an exhibition, or do you think it was Tank Davis's idea? Let me know what you guys think in the live chat. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, would you be completely okay with Ruiz Joshua 3? I mean, at this stage, if AJ wants to fight on, I'd rather see him fight Bakoli. I mean, I would prefer him to retire. I think he's suspend force. But if he's going to continue, then fight his contemporaries, and of course Ruiz is one of his contemporaries. But do they need a decider? Is AJ going to run around the ring like he did in the second fight? I'd like to see Ruiz get a win first, you know? Maybe AJ get a win, and if they both look decent in their wins, maybe match them together after that. But from what I'm hearing, AJ's looking at a Bakoli fight. There's a interview that just went up on Pro Boxing Fans where an individual called Ezekiel Adamu says that AJ versus Mike Bakoli is in the works. So we'll see what happens. But I don't hate the fight between AJ and Ruiz, but I do feel as though this heavyweight era has had too many rematches. So if AJ insists on carrying on, I'd rather see him fight somebody else as a priority. But if there's nobody else and he decides to have that trilogy match with Andy Ruiz, it's a shoulder shrugger for me. It's like, okay. Shout out to Matt for the super chat again. He says, how funny would it be if we get obese Tank Davis? That would be pretty funny. Yes, Rastafari Exactamundo. Big up Exactamundo in the chat. Oh, excuse me. Did I say Usyk? Sorry, not Usyk, Joshua 3. Excuse me. Ruiz, Joshua 3. Bit tired today, folks. Forgive me. 23 baby mother. That's right. Real bad man. Yeah, Usyk. Not Usyk. Ruiz, Joshua 3. Or Joshua Ruiz 3. However, which way you want to put it. Regular says Jake Paul versus Beetlejuice. That would be bizarre. So let's move on from this. And in fact, no, before we move on, even though this isn't on their official records, let's get a show of hands. Do you think that both guys are actually going to try in this fight, particularly Tank Davis? And if they do both try, what do you think the result of the fight will be? Will it be Tank Davis knocking out Jake Paul? Tank Davis soundly outboxing Jake Paul? Or Jake Paul landing some big stuff, nullifying Tank Davis? What do you guys think? Matt says, I think Jake Paul will drop him with a jab, honestly. I mean, he's big enough, right? Think about it. There's basically, 80 pounds between them in weight? Tank Davis is 130. Jake Paul maybe 210 in weight. So we're basically talking about an 80 pounds weight difference. And the height difference is crazy too. Tank Davis is about 5'4", 5'5". Jake Paul's about 6'1", 6'2". So it might be like a 9 or 10 inch height difference here. It looked crazy when Mayweather was in there against Jake Paul's brother, Logan Paul. Just from a physical perspective, it looked crazy. This is going to look even crazier than that, because the size difference is even larger. Exactamundo says, I think it will be a buddy sparring match. Nail Jackson says, legend has it Paul will have a rehydration clause. That'd be weird. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, Logan Paul had no idea how to turn his punches, though. Yeah, Jake is a lot better than Logan Paul. A lot better. And that's why he's pursued boxing far more than his brother Logan, who's gone into WWE, is it? Or AWE? He's gone into wrestling. JR says, get Littleman versus Big Show on the undercard. I mean, since it's a freak show, why not, right? If it's a freak show, might as well go all the way with it. Mr. Grandy says, Tank ducked Lamont Roach. Dominic says, Davis should be stripped of the belt. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, Jake Paul versus Johnny Fisher would be a banger, mate. I like the fight. I would like to see Johnny Fisher fight Jake Paul. That's why I said after, I think it was in the live stream, when Johnny Fisher got knocked out by Dave Allen in the rematch. I can't remember if it was me who came up with the idea during the live stream or whether it was one of you guys in the live chat. It was definitely on that live stream where somebody suggested, I think it was somebody else actually in the live chat that suggested Johnny Fisher going to Misfits. I think it's a great idea because he has his Bosch army. He's got his dad that does gimmicky social media content. He's got his little catchphrase. I think the Romford Bull would be perfect for Misfits, at least for now. Go in there, tear stuff up, target Jake Paul. I think it's a good fight. And it's a fight which Johnny Fisher would probably win, in my estimation anyway. Shout out to Ibrahim for the super chat. He says, Jake versus Fisher is a lot closer than people think. I've got Bosch taking it though. Same as me. It's a lot closer than people think, but I do reckon Johnny Bosch would get the W. So, and what other fight could Johnny Fisher take that would pay him anywhere close to the kind of money that he'd get for fighting Jake Paul? That's the road I think he should go down. I suspect he won't, because he wants to think of himself as a serious boxer and all that kind of thing. I respect his ambition, but I do think there's a bit of short-sightedness there. And it's not like he can't try and be a real boxer after his foray in Misfits. Do you know what I mean? You can do Misfits as a little, money-making exercise and build his name up and this, that, and the other. And if he gets through it and eventually gets the Paul fight, even if he doesn't get the Paul fight, get a few wins in Misfits and then resume the proper boxing career afterwards. It doesn't have to be either or. It can be both. George Fox. There you go. Johnny Bosch versus George Fox. Why not? Johnny Fisher versus Hasim Ratman Jr. Yup, they could do that in Misfits. Ratman Jr. lost to that MMA fighter, right? His name always escapes me. Is it Greg Hardy? I think it's Greg Hardy. Hasim Ratman Jr. lost to him. That was crazy. Simon Jones says Ruiz versus Itauma, who is faster? I want to say Itauma is faster overall, but when Ruiz's hands are in full flow, it's close between him and Itauma. Very close. Some days I think maybe Ruiz edges it. Other days I think Itauma. In fact, no, I'm going to say Itauma. Because there was one fight where Itauma was unloading on a guy and he wasn't even, trying to pick the shots necessarily. He was just letting both hands go because the guy was a journeyman, and the hand speed was insane. Faster than the hand speed we saw him display against Dillian Whyte. Because against Dillian Whyte, he was kind of picking his shots, but he was doing it in fast forward, right? So he wasn't operating at his absolute maximum full speed, in my opinion. So, whereas Andy Ruiz does operate full speed when he lets his shots go. So I'm going to say Itauma's actually got the faster hands, but it's close. Ruiz has still got very, very quick hands. We're going to come on to Ruiz in a little bit. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, I'd like to see Nico Ali Walsh in Misfits, maybe even Campbell Hatton too. That's a great shout as well. Especially Campbell Hatton. Yeah. He walked away from boxing, upset. He obviously had ambitions of following in his father's footsteps, but he doesn't have even a quarter of the talent of his father. So he ended up retiring. But why retire when you do have an opportunity to make a load of money and, gain followers? The youngsters, they love getting the followers and all that kind of thing. Why not, participate in Misfits? I agree with Matt on that. And also Nico Ali Walsh, similar thing. He's better than Campbell Hatton, Nico Ali Walsh, but yeah, he's not going anywhere fast, is he? So it's another good shout. I think a lot of these guys would be wise to at least consider a foray into Misfits. But it tends to be guys who are just, either totally washed up. I'm talking about people who turn professional. It tends to be guys who are totally washed up or YouTubers rather than relatively young fighters in their mid-20s, late 20s who have a background, proper amateur career and some professional experience. Not many of those kind of guys tend to go into Misfits. Hasim Ratman Jr. was one of them. He did go in there. I guess he realized he weren't going to make it in the big leagues. So when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. Shout out to Green Entity. He says, current Dylan White versus Jake Paul, who'd win? Still the current Dylan White. Even now, after Dylan White got cleaned out by Moses Itauma in, 2 minutes? He would still beat Jake Paul. I'm telling you, Jake Paul is an absolute novice. And Dylan White knows enough old man tricks, and he'll stick a jab on Jake Paul. Yeah, Jake Paul can move a little bit, but he doesn't have anything like Moses Itauma movement. He doesn't have the combination punching. He's not as big. He's not as powerful. His moves are easier to read. You know, he telegraphs a lot of stuff. I know. Dylan White would easily beat Jake Paul even now. Even now. Ebenezer Tete versus Jake Paul is actually a tough fight for Jake Paul. Somebody mentioned that in a live stream maybe a couple of weeks back. That would show you Jake Paul's level if he were to fight Ebenezer Tete. And I'm telling you, he'd struggle. I'm not 100% sure he'd win. He might win, but it would be a torrid struggle. Grind says Christian Hammer versus Jake Paul. If Christian Hammer actually has some ambition left for that fight, he can beat Jake Paul. I mean, the Christian Hammer that fought David Price would knock Jake Paul out. So it depends on how much ambition Christian Hammer still has. Because he's been turning up just for paydays and laying down easy like a $5 hooker, hasn't he, over the past few years. All right, so let's move on from Jake Paul versus Tank Davis. Some of you guys will be relieved. So, according to Boxing Kingdom on X, big news. Francis Ngannou is expecting negotiations for a fight against Deontay Wilder to begin soon. What do you guys think of this one? Now, again, Deontay Wilder, washed up beyond belief. I've been saying for at least the past year that this is the best fight, in my opinion, for Wilder in terms of risk-reward. Because he'd be going up against the guy who is just as uncultured in terms of boxing skills as he is. And a similar age, and also coming off, at least in a boxing match, I know he's won in MMA since, a devastating knockout loss. Wilder's since come back with a win. So, yeah, I reckon this is the best that there is out there for Deontay Wilder as far as risk-reward. A lot of people would actually pick Francis Ngannou at this stage over Deontay Wilder. Me, I'm not completely sure. It really depends on how hyped Ngannou is for the fight. Can Wilder still get that right hand off? Is that right hand still the same? Can he generate the intensity, the emotional intensity that he would channel into that right hand to give it that power anymore? Can he still do that, Deontay Wilder? I'm not sure. It's a fight which makes sense commercially, and it makes sense in terms of where both guys are in their careers, particularly Deontay Wilder. But for Francis Ngannou too, he always said they wanted to return to boxing, even after getting cleaned out by AJ in a couple of rounds. How do you guys think this fight would go? Francis Ngannou, Deontay Wilder, if it were to happen next. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, okay, what about Deontay Wilder? I like that one. I guess he was referring to this. Or are you talking about Deontay Wilder versus Jake Paul? Who are you talking about fighting Wilder, Matt? Yeah, Matt's also reacting, saying, yeah, I don't mind that one. Wilder against Francis Ngannou. Okay, you're talking about Wilder against Jake Paul previously. Wilder beats Jake Paul even now. I don't think Wilder would have too much trouble against Jake Paul. Yeah, he's done a fantastic job matchmaking. That's all I'll say about Jake Paul. He's done a fantastic job. Because, no, he'd still lose to Wilder comfortably even now, in my opinion. Okay, so Louis Mensah says, Wilder would KO Ngannou. Francis was so open to AJ's right hand. But the thing is, Wilder hasn't been throwing that right hand with any real venom for several fights now. Where was that right hand against Parker? Where was that right hand against Zhang? And where was that right hand in his last fight against the opponent whose name escapes me? Where was the right hand, you know? Does he even have the right hand anymore? Because I did a video after that fight, the last contest he had against the guy whose name I can't remember. And I was talking about how, in my view, part of what gave Deontay Wilder that tremendous punching power was the emotional energy that he would throw into the punch, that he would channel into that right hand. He doesn't have the same emotional energy anymore, and so I have to figure he doesn't have the same power anymore. And if he doesn't have the same power anymore, will he really hit Ngannou with the kind of shots that AJ hit him with? And also, AJ was countering Ngannou. You know, Ngannou would jab from too close in. He was making all these fundamental errors. AJ was catching him by countering him. I'm not saying Deontay Wilder can't counter with the right hand. He can, but I don't think he's as good at it as AJ is. So I think it's a very interesting fight. And if you watched Wilder's last fight, he was far more methodical than we're used to seeing. He's now got Don House as his lead coach, it would seem. I'm not sure if Malik Scott will be involved in a future Deontay Wilder bout, but Don House was his assistant coach, has been his assistant coach for several contests now. But now he's the head coach. Wilder was very methodical in his last fight, and I don't know whether it was working for him, you know? At least not in terms of the right hand. The jab was working okay and other punches, but the right hand is really Deontay Wilder's bread and butter. Throwing it hard and throwing it fast. Dr. Wu says, Wilder is far too gun-shy. I'm making Ngannou the slight favorite. I can see it. I can see it. Chris Lee says, Wilder versus Francis isn't a fully predictable fight. I agree. That's why I think it's even interesting for the fans, you know, not just a fight which makes sense for both guys, but for the fans, it's somewhat interesting. I guess Ace doesn't like the fight. He says, why are these kind of nonsense fights tolerated? Well, you've got two guys at the end of their careers. What's the harm in it? The only risk is to both fighters' health, obviously, but that aside, I don't see how the reputation of boxing would suffer. Or maybe you're referring to the Jake Paul, Tank Davis fight, but it's an exhibition, to be fair. Chris Lee says, although I would say Francis is all wrong for him. Francis Ngannou's best punch is the left hook. Deontay Wilder's best punch is a straight right hand. Right hand versus left hook. The house on Lampkin Lane says Francis needs to stay away from boxing. What AJ did to him was so easy. Ngannou really risks his health stepping into boxing. I think Ngannou has a much better chance against Deontay Wilder than he had against Anthony Joshua. I said from day one that AJ will beat Ngannou comfortably. He won't have any trouble at all. Whereas I think Wilder would have trouble with Ngannou. I think he would, because he's not as technically good as AJ, Deontay Wilder. I don't think he'll be able to exploit the weaknesses in Ngannou's game as well as Anthony Joshua did. I think it's a far more competitive fight. That's a good point from Chris Lees. He says, the lack of boxing pedigree makes Francis wrong. because he doesn't come with your average approach. Yeah, he's unorthodox. Both guys are unorthodox. It might be a bit of a street fight, you know? Or look like a street fight in spots. Samuel says Wilder has also lost that snap in his movements. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was alluding to. I think that snap in his movements, particularly the right hand, to some extent came from his emotional nature. He was always a very emotional fight. He would fight off of emotions. That emotion gave him adrenaline, and the adrenaline would give him the snap. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't seem to have that anymore. He seems too calm now. Maybe it's age. Maybe it's the beatings he's taken. Maybe it was the toad. Yeah, the box said it right there. I'm going to call it the toad, even though it's something different, but you know, a hallucinogenic substance that begins with A. I know the name of it. I just don't want to say it at this stage for the sake of the algorithm, just in case. So we'll move on from Deontay Wilder, Francis Ngannou. I think it's a good fight. Some less high-profile boxing news here. I call it news. It's a tweet exchange. You got Josh Kelly tweeting that target is locked in. The hunter becomes the hunted. He's atted Murtazaliev. And Murtazaliev replied by saying, "See you soon." This is a fight that Josh Kelly and his trainer, and I think also manager Adam Booth, have been saying that they are pursuing. Well, if target is locked in, does that mean that Josh Kelly's signed? Will he be getting his world title shot against Murtazaliev? You know, there was an interesting conversation going on in my Element group the other day with some people wondering whether the Tim Tszyu victory for Murtazaliev maybe flattered him a little bit. And perhaps Josh Kelly's got a better chance against him than most people would think. What do you guys reckon? I'm not saying I necessarily agree. I'm just saying it's an interesting thought process. What do you guys reckon? Mr. Lucas says Josh Kelly will get filled right in. Wave says, I agree, it flattered him. Okay. Oh, Wave thinks that Josh Kelly's back foot style is all wrong for Bakram. Mr. Grandy says Josh Kelly going to dance around the ring for 12 rounds. He ain't hurting. Ish. Yeah, for me, I would have to pick Bakram in the fight. I mean, Josh Kelly was hurt late on against Ishmael Davis. Josh Kelly's just got this vulnerability about him, which isn't going to go anywhere. We first saw it, obviously, when he fought God, what's the guy called now? I forgot his name. The guy who beat Josh Kelly, who also got sparked out by Terence Crawford. What's his name now? Begins with an A. Evanesian. Thank you, Blue Tiger. Yes, we saw that vulnerability for Josh Kelly in the Evanesian fight. And it's kind of reared its head every now and then since. He hasn't gassed out to the same extent that he did in the Evanesian fight, of course. But yeah, there's just this vulnerability about him. And in the final stages of that Ishmael Davis fight, it was on display again. And Ishmael Davis took that fight on very short notice. If you guys remember, that was originally supposed to be Liam Smith in there against Josh Kelly. AJ says he'll get broken. Felix says can't get Kelly versus David out of my head. I guess you mean Evanesian. Shout out to HC for the super chat. He says, fantasy matchup, Haney versus Frank Warren in the courtroom. You threw me off with that one. I thought it was going to be Haney versus an actual boxer. I mean, I got to go with Frank Warren because Haney dropped the lawsuit, right? He dropped the lawsuit with Ryan Garcia. I think maybe Turkey Al-Sheikh whispered in his ear at the time and told him, yeah, just drop that lawsuit and we'll make the rematch between you and Garcia for a load of money. So I got to go with Frank Warren because Frank Warren don't drop lawsuits. He don't drop lawsuits, bro. Even if he was about to put you out of house and home and make your whole family destitute, I couldn't see him dropping a lawsuit. Personally, in my opinion, I couldn't see it. Frank is ruthless when it comes to lawsuits. So, and there's only one lawsuit that I'm aware of him losing. In fact, two. Two lawsuits that I'm aware of him losing. He lost the lawsuit to Don King back in the days, and he lost the lawsuit to Joe Calzaghe. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, he dropped the lawsuit against Eubank, but only because they settled out of court. And Frank Warren was smugly in all the interviews smiling, saying, I'm very happy with the settlement. When somebody says they're very happy with a settlement, it means they got paid a load of money. So let me rephrase. Let me rewind and remix. Frank Warren doesn't drop lawsuits unless he gets a settlement he's happy with. Yeah? I'm talking about dropping a lawsuit outright. As far as I'm aware, Devin Haney dropped the lawsuit outright against Ryan Garcia. I don't think there was a settlement. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he just dropped it outright with no kind of settlement. HC says, Haney is suing his baby mama now. Now that's a lawsuit that I can get behind. I think some of these baby mamas need to get sued, right? They're taking enough money off these wealthy athletes and celebrities. They're coming in demanding, 20 grand child support a month. Most of which is going to go on them living a lavish lifestyle, not the child, right? The woman. Flying out everywhere and living in luxury. So it's good to see flipping the script. Yeah, flip the script on them. Sue the baby mama. Coach Flip says, have I missed the Tank versus Paul chat? Yeah, we had that chat about maybe 10 minutes ago or so. If you rewind the stream. Triple R says Calzaghe undefeated in court too. Yeah, in the ring and in the courtroom, Calzaghe was undefeated. That's right. AJ says lost to Calzaghe, didn't he? And folded his company, I thought. Yeah, he folded the company allegedly as a way of not paying the full amount of the settlement. I'm not sure if Calzaghe got the full amount. I think he did get some, but I'm not sure if he got the full amount. All right, let's move on from Josh Kelly versus Murtazaliev. The exodus is in full swing. Vidal Riley posted this on his Instagram account the other day. Free agent season. The British Cruiserweight champion apparently splitting from Ben Shalom, who lost his Sky deal. We've seen Joshua Buatsi leave Ben Shalom. He's now with Queensbury. We've heard rumors of Adam Azim leaving, but I haven't seen any confirmation. And the big one, of course, would be Ben Whittaker. Will Ben Whittaker leave Ben Shalom? That's the one who Ben Shalom is going to be trying most desperately to keep hold of, is Ben Whittaker. He'll be selling him on all the BBC stuff. We can make you into an even bigger star and do this and that. And yeah, he'll be giving him the absolute sales pitch. He'll probably be down on his knees begging Ben Whittaker not to leave. That's what Ben Shalom will be doing right now, because Vidal Riley has left, British Cruiserweight champion. Now, Some people are going to say, who cares? Vidal Riley's not exciting. He's a mover. He isn't particularly entertaining. Well, some of you may think he's not particularly entertaining. I tend to think he's a very, very good fighter. And he's got a massive social media following. And so when it comes to promoters, you're looking at stuff like that. The value of a fighter to you is how many eyes can he draw to his fights. And because Vidal Riley's got such a big social media following from the time when he was coaching YouTubers like KSI, I think he coached KSI, right? Yeah, that's why he's got this big following. He's got a YouTube channel that does a lot of views as well. So he says it's free agent season. Where will he end up if this is indeed true? Frank Warren? Eddie Hearn? An American promoter, perhaps? What do you guys think? Do any of you guys actually care? Mr. Lucas says Adam Azim will go to Frank soon. Warren Williams says, I think he'll go to Matchroom because he was with 258. Well, he was with 258 when he went to Ben Shalom, so I don't necessarily think that it's set in stone he would go to Matchroom. I'm sure he'll look at his options as far as the fights they can get him, but big up Warren Williams. Exactamundo says Whitaker will go to Uncle Eggy, and it'll be hilarious when he does. Mr. Lucas says he thinks he'll go to Warren. He says, I think there is a couple of fighters signed with Queensbury and 258. Okay, we got a Luke Partridge fanboy. These Partridge fanboys get so upset. Are you the Partridge fanboy who was fanboying in my Element group a year or two ago for Partridge? Is that you? I seem to remember it was a similar name. The Partridge fanboys are traumatized. Grind says Matchroom makes the most sense considering Opatira is with Matchroom. That's if Vidal Riley wants any part of Jai Opataya. Maybe he's looking for a Ramirez fight. If he's looking for the Ramirez fight or the Badu Jack fight, where's the best place to go? Who's Badu Jack signed with? Badu Jack has still got the WBC strap, right? Who's he actually signed with? Has he got a deal with the Saudis? Ramirez is obviously with Golden Boy still. Shout out to Gaz for the super chat. He says, Prime Hrgovic versus Vlad and Howe. That's a real good fight, you know. That is a real good fight. Vlad was better defensively, definitely a harder puncher. But Hrgovic got a very good chin, pretty good jab himself, creative offense. That's a real good fight. I'm going to say Vlad on points. I'm going to say Vlad on points, but that's a good fight. Because if Hrgovic can have the punch output and break free from Vlad's clinches, bear in mind they're the same height, similar weight, and he can force Vlad to fight him, he might be able to do it. That's actually a really good fight. It's a random matchup, but that's a really good fight. I would edge towards Vlad because I think his feet are sharper. I think defensively is a bit more switched on. And I like his jab better. But it's a good fight. Shout out to Gaz for the super chat. Big up Bobs. He says, Usyk has a 6 to 12 month window left to Old Man Moses. I would agree with that. But I don't think it's the right fight for Itauma to take right now. And from the Usyk side of things, I'd be disappointed if he fought Itauma as well, because you got Ike Ibeabuchi and Joseph Parker, who have more than earned their shot. So if Usyk is going to fight on in a real fight, you know, not Jake Paul and MMA or whatever, then he needs to be taking on the Joseph Parkers and Ike Ibeabuchis of the world, or else retire. So shout out to Bobs for the super chat. AJ says Partridge fanboys should be entitled to free therapy. And boy, do they need it. They are traumatized. I keep giving them flashbacks. Mac B says, big up Hatman, I see people writing Luke Partridge in the comments on different YouTube videos. You started a trend. I hope so. I hope I've started this trend. I hope it goes viral. Long may it continue. Luke Partridge, hashtag. All right, let's move on from Vidal Riley then and his free agent status. You see here Vidal Riley on his Instagram account saying free agent season. Vidal Riley leaves Ben Shalom, apparently. Let's talk about the prelims. Dana White put out a video, which was on YouTube. I'm not sure if it was on other social media platforms. It might have been. But he put out a video talking about the prelims. These are the fights that will be shown for free on YouTube before the main card on Netflix. And pretty much everyone's got Netflix anyway, so it doesn't really make any difference that it's on YouTube to most people. But either way, this undercard initially was seemingly going to be very weak. Turki Al-Sheikh came out appealing to, I guess, trainers, promoters, whoever, maybe fighters themselves, to put themselves forward to fight on this undercard, because he said he wanted this undercard to be about talent. He didn't want to put big names on it. Well, there aren't any particularly big names on it, and we'll get onto the full undercard in a second, but there are some solid names. So first of all, as part of the prelims on YouTube for Canelo Crawford, they got Sergey Boachuk taking on Brandon Adams. That's a good fight. Bear in mind, Brandon Adams beat Sergey Boachuk first time they fought. Boachuk has gone on to put on some good performances since. So that's a good fight right there for a prelim bout. Sergey Boachuk versus Brandon Adams. What do you guys think about that one? Shout out to Mr. Luca for the super chat. He says, Smith and Hearn still begging it with Paul. Oh, for real? They're still making out as though that fight is going to happen and it's not dead in the water, even though Jake Paul has announced he's fighting Tank Davis. I'll have to check that out after the stream. Wave says the undercard is trash. I disagree. I think it's relatively interesting. It's not as strong as many of the other Saudi undercards, right? This fight is not in Saudi, but you know, the Saudi promoted or bankrolled cards. Grand says Boachuk for free, fair play. Indeed, Boachuk is always value for money. Mr. Grandy says the undercard is C tier. Well, this isn't the whole undercard. This is just the prelims. We'll come on to the whole undercard in a second. Jake says, Hatman, at what age were you most obsessed with boxing? Was it before social media? Did you ever become an unhealthy obsession where you had to find out every detail and result of fights? Yeah, I was totally obsessed. Most obsessed with boxing during the 90s when I was a teenager. Totally obsessed. I would buy every single boxing publication. I would check teletext and CFAX every day, many, many times a day, for any snippet of boxing news coming through from overseas or anywhere. I would literally buy every single boxing publication there was. Boxing news came out, I think it was every week or bi-weekly, might have been every week. I would buy boxing news every week, back when it was a big broadsheet. In fact, It was small form first, and then it went broadsheet, and then it went back to small form. Is that how it went? I forget now. But anyway, I bought all the publications from Boxing News, Boxing Monthly, Boxing Illustrated, KO Magazine, Ring Magazine. Yeah. The Marshall Cavendish limited edition boxing magazines that would come with a VHS videotape strapped to the front. I would buy all of them, tape everything that I could tape. I'd watch obscure fights on Eurosport. I was totally obsessed back in the 90s. Shout out to Suited and Booted for the super chat. He says, evening Hatman, just tuning in. Big up. And big up Suited and Booted. So, what else have we got on here then as part of the prelims? Ivan Ditchko versus Jermaine Franklin. That's also an interesting fight. I expect Ivan Ditchko to win, but he's had a very slow burning professional career so far. For those of you who don't know, Ivan Ditchko is a Kazakh heavyweight. Is he Kazakh or Uzbek? I think he's Kazakh. But he's from Central Asia out there. He fought Anthony Joshua in the Olympics. He fought Erislandi Savon, and interestingly enough, AJ, in the eyes of most people, blatantly lost to Savon in his first fight in the Olympics. Ivan Ditchko, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going off memory here, actually has a win over Erislandi Savon in the amateurs. Just shows you how styles make fights. So Ivan Ditchko, very tall fighter, might be about 6'8", something like that. Fights in a typical Eastern Bloc style. Was a very experienced amateur. But for some reason, his professional career has been an extremely slow burn. Similar to Bakoli Jalilov, actually. But I don't think Ditchko has been going back and forth from pro boxing to amateur boxing the way Jalilov has. So I'm not sure what the reason is for Ditchko making such little progress. But anyway, he fights Jermaine Franklin on the undercard. I'll be interested to have a look at both of them, particularly Ditchko, to see how well he deals with Jermaine Franklin, because it's a yardstick. You know, we know how Dylan White did with Franklin. That was a very close fight, actually. AJ was able to beat Franklin comfortably on points. How will Ditchko do? And, of course, it's also interesting because Franklin must have been one of the opponents that Team Itauma were looking for by the end of the year, you know, to match their charge against him. Whereas since Franklin is fighting Ditchko, that will probably rule him out. It'll be a pretty quick turnaround for him if not. So, yeah, that's also interesting. Now, the others, Ritio Susumi versus Javier Martinez, Sultan Al-Mohammed versus Martin Caraballo. Steve Nelson against Ranko Santana. Marco Verdi versus TBD, to be decided. Or to be determined. Here is the full card. All right. Actually, it is the full card. Oh, no, because Callum Walsh is on there. And Christian and Billy. That's on the full card. So Christian and Billy versus Martinez. Yeah, that's an unbeaten fighter that Billy's going up against. I don't think I've seen Lester Martinez box. Have any of you guys seen Lester Martinez? But Christian and Billy's always value for money. So having him on the undercard is a nice thing. That's a 10-rounder. Right? Christian and Billy's on there. Callum Walsh versus Fernando Vargas Jr. is on there. So I don't think it's a trash undercard. I think it's like, it's okay. I've seen far worse Canelo undercards than this. Trust me. I think this undercard's actually okay. Especially given the fact it's not pay-per-view, you know? You can watch most of the undercard for free on YouTube if you don't have a Netflix subscription, but most people do have a Netflix subscription, so you get to watch all these fights. I reckon it's fairly decent for a non-pay-per-view event. Oh, wow. Adrian says Lester Martinez actually beat an ancient Mayorga on his pro debut. Is that right? Mac B says Ditchko and Franklin are both solid fighters, but both lack heart and that killer instinct. Could be a boring fight. Suited and Booted says Ring Magazine is back. Anyone grabbed them? Oh yeah, they relaunched the actual physical Ring Magazine, didn't they? Seems like basically a move motivated by pure nostalgia rather than any kind of viable or sustainable business. Wave says all these people are signed to Dana White, so no Itauma fight for Franklin. Is Franklin signed to Dana White? Are you sure? Last I checked, Jermaine Franklin was with Dimitri Salita. Shout out to HC for the super chat. He says, apparently Lester Martinez is a puncher. He's from Guatemala, is that right? You don't get many fighters coming out of Guatemala. Wave says, that's what I'm assuming because of TKO. Well, Christian and Billy is not signed to Dana White. Christian and Billy is with, what's the name of the French-Canadian promoter? I always forget his name now. He used to promote Adonis Stevenson. Isn't Billy with him? Or isn't Billy with one of the American promoters? I'm certainly not aware of Billy being with Dana White. At all. Adrian says, Lester seems good from what I've seen of him. He beat Gongora some fights ago. Okay. Oh, there you go. No Cap Boxing says Top Rank promoting Billy. So unless he's left Top Rank because of their lack of broadcaster, then he would not be a Dana White fighter. And obviously bear in mind, Dana White and Bob Arum don't get along at all. Ayad says, apparently Stevenson is injured again. As in Shakur Stevenson. Does he have a fight coming up? Vader says, and Billy was with the Eye of the Tiger, co-promoted by Top Rank, similar to Makhmudov. Who's the Canadian promoter I'm thinking of then, who used to promote Adonis Stevenson? Yvonne Michel. That's his name, Yvonne Michel. I guess he wasn't promoting Billy then, because he was promoting pretty much every Canadian fighter for years, Yvonne Michel. You guys remember? He was even promoting Artur Beterbiev when he was based in Canada. He promoted Jean Pascal. And pretty much anyone who was anyone in Canada was promoted by Yvonne Michel for many, many years. All right, so let's move on from this undercard then. Andy Ruiz is back. Yeah, he suffered a very bad hand injury in his last bout, which was a controversial draw with Jerome Miller. Most people feel like Miller was hard done by, and he should have got the W. Ruiz, in the post-fight interview, showed his hand on camera, and it was all types of jacked up. So he weren't faking a hand injury. He weren't making excuses. His hand was mash up. I mean, the bone was damn near sticking out of his hand, right? Fully mash up, hand injury, which he surely would have needed surgery on and whatnot. So, yeah, he's had his surgery. I'm not sure if it was just for the hand or if there was something else as well. And posted some footage of him hitting the mitts. The hand speed still looks crazy. Still looks crazy. But he'll need maybe a shaking off the rust fight. He might need that because when was the Miller fight? Over a year ago, right? Or was it about a year ago? I think it was in August, wasn't it? 2024, when Andy Ruiz fought Jarrell Miller. You guys jog my memory on the exact date. And I want to say Andy Ruiz is one of the biggest disappointments of the outgoing generation of heavyweights because he had a lot of potential. We saw it not only in the first Anthony Joshua fight, but even when he fought Joseph Parker, he showed plenty of potential. Okay, it was August 3rd, so it's over a year ago now since he had that very controversial draw with Jarrell Miller, where Miller basically just bullied him around the ring. And Miller's obviously got a very hard head because Andy Ruiz hit him somewhere and mashed up his hand quite early on. Ace says Itauma should fight Dubois or Hrgovic. Hrgovic is apparently not available for now because of the cut he suffered against Adelaide, at least not before the end of the year. So Itauma might have to wait a while if he wants to fight Hrgovic. And Hrgovic is going to want a lot of money to fight Itauma. And who else did you suggest? Dubois. Well, Dubois actually did an interview with TalkSport. Not sure how many of you guys have seen this, but he did an interview with TalkSport earlier on today. And Jim White asked Dubois directly, would you fight Moses Itauma? And Dubois basically ducked the question. He said, when I'm right and when I get my team sorted out, I'll fight anybody. But he didn't say he'd fight Moses Itauma. So if he is at some point willing to fight Itauma, I don't think it's anytime soon. So as much as we'd like to see those fights, they don't seem likely right now. Ryan Eames says, I think Ruiz is done. He had plenty of years to get himself together. He just doesn't have the discipline. Yeah, and Andy Ruiz is a happy-go-lucky guy, sociable, likes hanging out with his friends. He had that issue with his baby mama, talking about baby mamas. He had an issue with a baby mama since he hooked up with some new chick, and the baby mama was trying to drag his name through the mud on social media. So Andy Ruiz seems to be far more involved with his life outside the ring than his life inside the ring. And it's been that way ever since he got the big payday, ever since he hit the lottery in the first Anthony Joshua fight. And he really made the money in the second Anthony Joshua fight. But he started spending the money even from the first fight right away. Buying big houses, I think even in Mexico, and just living large. And he's never really recovered, has he? He's never recovered from the lifestyle elevation that he got from those Joshua fights. The money he made revealed who he really is. He's a guy who is good at boxing, but doesn't really love it. I think it's fair to come to that conclusion about Andy Ruiz. He's good at boxing, but he doesn't really love it. Similar to Michael Hunter, I think. Michael Hunter's another guy who was talented, but I don't think he really ever loved boxing. He just went into it because his dad was a professional boxer. It was like the family trade, As soon as he tasted a bit of money, he drifted off into obscurity, and he didn't taste as much money as Andy Ruiz did, obviously. Chris Lee says, why not be your best? Some people are preoccupied, Andy Ruiz is a very sociable guy. He likes hanging out with his friends, drinking, smoking. Remember, I think it might have been after the second AJ fight. It surely wasn't after the first AJ fight. It might have been after. Maybe it was. I can't remember now. But Andy Ruiz was posting photos on social media of him with enormous sacks of weed. You guys remember that? He was like hanging out with his friends on the couch, drinking Coronas, and, he had these enormous sacks of green. And I'm like, damn, this guy's all the way gone. Ryan Emer says Bakoli might be the same. I don't think he likes boxing either. We'll come on to Bakoli. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that one, Exactamundo. Yes, remember that picture his baby mama leaked of him getting his blood cleaned. That's right. The inference being he was doing something he shouldn't be doing. Mac B says, Hatman, you pointed this out many times, and I still didn't realize how fast Itauma is. I saw the ringside video from the White fight, and Itauma's hand speed and accuracy is scary good. Yeah. And he wasn't even in full flow when he was attacking Dillian Whyte. He was actually picking his shots, but he was picking his shots in fast forward. He was picking his shots in double time. When he's absolutely emptying the tank on somebody, the hand speed's another level still above that. Warren Williams says, a lot of boxers don't like boxing. Some fighters grow out of love with boxing, They grow out of love with it after they've made a certain amount of money, after they've had their trials and tribulations in the ring and outside the ring. They get fed up. Prince Nassim was like that. He grew fed up with boxing. By the time he fought Marco Antonio Barrera, he didn't have the hunger anymore. I'm not making an excuse for him, but it's just the reality. Several fights before he lost to Barrera, he wasn't the same already. Do you know what I mean? Even though he was still undefeated, he just wasn't in love with the sport anymore. He'd been boxing since he was 8. And he was enjoying the lavish lifestyle outside the ring more than he was enjoying the training. So some fighters lose the love for it. Other fighters never really loved it to begin with. For some fighters, it was just a job from day one. It was the only thing they could do, so they went into it because what else are they going to do? And they never really loved it. They just did it out of desperation, really, And I suspect Andy Ruiz was like that. Andy Ruiz is a guy who's never really loved it. Just did it because he was good at it. And what else is he going to do? Exactamundo says, Ruiz Jr. is like a Breaking Bad character. I guess you're talking about Combo. There's a character in Breaking Bad called Combo. I think he gets offed, doesn't he, Combo? I don't think he makes it, Combo. Shout out to James Clifford for the super chat. Big up, James. He says, late to the live, just arrived at the gym to hit the bag. Well, listen in. Have a great live, guys. It's almost the weekend. And get the likes up. Big up, James Clifford, every time. Yes, please, folks. If you can get the likes up, it'd be much appreciated. We got 315 concurrent viewers. If we can get at least 150 likes, that'll keep the concurrent viewers to likes ratio around 50%, which is where I like to keep it. Thank you guys in advance. Much appreciated. And big up James Clifford each and every time. Vader D says, Hunter, I think, was a real boxing guy, but the politics of the sport soured him and caused him to fall out with Hearn post-Povetkin fight. The reason I say Hunter never really liked boxing in the first place is because he got rid of Hasim Rahman, who was his trainer and manager. And then he signed a deal with Triller. To me, that doesn't sound like a guy who's fed up and soured with regards to boxing politics. To me, that sounds like a guy who doesn't really want to box and who's just looking for the bag. Yeah? He cut Hasim Rahman Sr. out, presumably because he thought Rahman Sr. was taking too much money. But you pay people because they're competent, right? You pay people that money because they're worth it. And based upon the performances that Michael Hunter has put on since, I have to say that Hasim Rahman was worth the money he was paying him. Yeah? He was paying him a manager's cut and a trainer's cut. He was worth it. Because all the best performances that Hunter put on in his career were with Hasim Rahman in his corner. The performance against Usyk, the performance against Bakoli, even the performance against Povetkin, the performance against... what's the other guy called now? The Russian guy that he beat. I always forget the guy's name. Big burly Russian guy who chinned Joe Joyce in the amateurs. Kuzmin, thank you, Eya. Yes, Sergey Kuzmin. All of his best performances were under Hasim Rahman Sr. He had the opportunity to fight Hrgovic for 600 grand, whatever it was, 300, would have been half. So I guess he would have got 400 grand. He turned that down and signed with Triller. Again, that to me doesn't sound like a guy who is jaded because of boxing politics. It sounds like a guy who doesn't really love boxing, and he thought he'd hit the jackpot when he was offered money by Triller for a bunch of easy fights. And it backfired in spectacular fashion because he basically burned his bridges chasing easy money with Triller. And he's been left out in the wilderness since. Although now he's got another opportunity, it would seem. We'll see how it goes. An opportunity against Jerome Miller by Turkey, etc. on the Thursday before the... Is it the Canelo Crawford? Yes, before the Canelo Crawford fight on the Thursday before. Will that fight go ahead? In fact, let me double check that. It is before the Canelo Crawford bout, right? I've got the... Yeah, it is, yeah. Yeah, the Thursday before the Canelo Crawford bout. That's when Michael Hunter is supposed to be fighting Jerome Miller on very short notice. We'll see if that goes ahead because apparently Don King is threatening to sue and this, that, and the other. He says he's still got a contract with Michael Hunter. We'll see how that holds up. Ayed says, I think it's been cancelled. Has it? Ryan Nima says Miller Hunter is off. Okay. Who's it according to? Who's the fight off according to? Oh, Miller said today. So Miller's saying it's off. That's a shame. So I guess Don King managed to get his way. Maybe the Saudis didn't want to pay King what he was asking for. I know. Exactly, Kyle. Being signed to Don King in 2025 is crazy. And I want to say that Michael Hunter, from a business perspective, you understand. I'm not talking about him in the ring, because in the ring he's a very smart fighter. But outside the ring, as a businessman, Michael Hunter is one of the dumbest businessmen in boxing I've seen for a long time. Terrible move. Leaving Matchroom and avoiding the Hrgovic fight. Terrible move getting rid of Hasim Rahman as his trainer and manager. Terrible move signing with Don King. Who the hell does that? At this stage of the game, you know? This ain't the 90s or the 80s. You don't sign with Don King now. He was a psychopath to begin with. Now he's a senile psychopath. In fact, let me look up this unfortunate news. Jerome Miller saying the... did he say it on social media or has he put out a video regarding the Hunter fight? Oh, hang on. So it says the fight is off, but Michael Hunter is denying pulling out. So Michael Hunter, in fact, let me get this up on screen. Michael Hunter has done an interview on Chris Mannix's channel, and he's saying that Jerome Miller's a liar. I never pulled out of the fight. This is interesting. We know Jerome Miller's a liar. I mean, that goes without saying. That goes without saying. Let me get this up on screen for you guys so you can see the screenshot. Just 1 second here. There you go. That's the video that's just been uploaded to Chris Mannix's YouTube channel. An interview with Michael Hunter. Big Baby is a liar. Michael Hunter unloads on Jarrell Miller. Pause. Swears he never pulled out a fight. Who do you guys believe? I'm going to watch this right after the stream. Salimi says, why is Itauma getting so much praise? He only fought journeyman. Is Dylan White a journeyman? Wave says he never pulled out, but Don King and all the legalities caused the fight to be off. James Clifford says, Don is so old and senile, he probably thought he signed Michael Hunter Sr. In fact, I think Michael Hunter Sr. might have been signed to Don King at one point. Spen says, McKean ain't a journeyman either. That's correct. That's right. McKean went nearly 12 rounds with Filip Hrgovic. He ain't a journeyman. Salimi says, just a typical modern heavyweight if you judge on abilities. I don't know what you're looking at. Like, honestly, Itauma is not a typical modern heavyweight at all. He has exceptional potential. He doesn't look like a typical... I mean, what typical modern heavyweight is sparring world-class heavyweights and world-class cruiserweights when they're 14 and 15 years old? What typical modern heavyweight, even though Itauma didn't have loads of amateur fights, because he was so good, he was fast-tracked into international tournaments as a junior and he won them all. Never lost a fight. He was fighting at the highest level as a junior. He won all his fights. The way he moves, his hand speed, his foot speed, the way he picks his shots. No. This is not a typical modern heavyweight at all. Far from it. This is a prodigy. Now, there's a difference between having potential and fulfilling your potential. I'd certainly say that. But Itauma has, and one of the reasons people are so excited is because he clearly has the potential to not only become a world champion, but be something very, very special indeed if he can pass certain tests, as in the gut check and the chin check and the stamina check. If he can pass those 3 tests, we could be looking at somebody that goes on to be a long reigning champion. Salimi says, all those journeymen before White did way better against Itauma. Mike Tyson went the distance with journeymen before he fought Trevor Berbick. Mike Tyson went the distance with journeymen before he fought Pinklon Thomas. Does that mean that Pinklon Thomas and Trevor Berbick were worse than the journeymen that Mike Tyson went the distance with? No, because Trevor Berbick actually beat some of the journeymen that Mike Tyson went the distance with. Did you know that? Itauma upped his level against Dillian Whyte. He was actually 10 pounds lighter, at least 10 pounds lighter for Whyte than he was for Balogun. So he upped it even more against Dillian Whyte. I mean, Dillian Whyte is shot, no doubt about it, but Dillian Whyte's not a journeyman. If you can't see the talent, the obvious, precocious talent in Itauma, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. Fernie G says, Hatman, do you ever see Jared Anderson fixing his defensive issues? Going back to Salimi says, Itauma isn't even fast. Speed is such a misunderstood concept in boxing. If you want to know what speed in boxing is, you should watch Roy Jones, Floyd, and James Toney. They're not heavyweights. Why are you comparing Moses Itauma, a 240-pound heavyweight, to Roy Jones? That doesn't even make sense. Or a welterweight in Mayweather. Yeah, James Toney fought a heavyweight. Roy Jones fought a heavyweight at the back end of their careers. James Toney was obese at heavyweight. Really and truly, you're dealing with a couple of super middleweights in Toney and Jones and a welterweight in Mayweather, and you're comparing their hand speed to like, are you even serious? You must be kidding, Salimi, with what you're saying. You're saying that Itauma's not fast because he's not as fast as Roy Jones and James. I mean, make it make sense. Compare Itauma to heavyweights. We're not comparing him to welterweights, bro. Good God, man. A misunderstood concept. It's not a concept. Speed is a real, tangible thing. And saying, oh, he's not fast. You ain't seen Roy Jones if you think Itauma's fast. What? Okay, you must be trolling. Why are you comparing Floyd, a welterweight, to a heavyweight in speed? Like, you must be trolling. How is that even relevant? Of course a welterweight's going to be faster than a top-level welterweight is going to be faster than Itauma. What are you smoking, bro? Man's wilding out here. Anyway, let's move on from Andy Ruiz, Michael Hunter, Big Baby Miller. Let's talk about another heavyweight here. Did any of you guys see this? 52-year-old Ike Ibeabuchi, who's scheduled to fight, I think, tomorrow. In his first fight in 26 years. He obviously went away for a long time. He was incarcerated in a penitentiary in the United States in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, when he got locked up. He eventually got out, was deported back to Nigeria, and at the age of 51, I think when he embarked on this journey, now 52, he's climbing back in the ring to resume his boxing career. 52 years of age. But anyway, he put up sparring footage of himself, and it's the full thing, of himself and Efe Ajagba sparring. 52-year-old Ike Ibeabuchi sparring Efe Ajagba. And there's a moment in the spot, and Ajagba's going easy on him. You can tell. I mean, it's like watching Clarissa Shields' male sparring partners, clearly going easy on her, most of them. Making her think she's better than she actually is. Similar thing here with Efe Ajagba and Ike Ibeabuchi. Ajagba going very easy on him, but at one point, he hits Ibeabuchi with a fairly innocuous, by Ajagba's standards, looking right hand. And Ike Ibeabuchi is all over the place, as you would expect when a fighter is this age. A fighter who hasn't been taking punches for, I'm not sure if he had any fights in jail, but it's not the same as professional boxing, right? Getting in there with big heavyweights. So you would expect a guy of this age, who's been out the ring for this long, to not be able to take shots anymore. And that certainly seems to be the case for Ibeabuchi. All I can tell you about Ibeabuchi at this stage of the game is that for a man of his age, and this is the video, by the way, okay, if you look it up, that's the title of the video, full unedited sparring with WBC silver heavyweight champ ahead of August 23. Thanks and God bless. So I guess it's Saturday then, not tomorrow, Friday. It'll be Saturday that Ibeabuchi climbs back in the ring for the first time in 26 years. He last fought in 1999. That's the video if you guys want to watch it. Watch the spar. What I can tell you is that Ibeabuchi, from watching his YouTube videos over the past 6 months or whatever, maybe year, in my opinion, he's still crazy. However, he is still a physical specimen at the age of 52. I mean, this guy's got muscles on his muscles at 52. This guy is built like a brick-ish house at 52. It's crazy. You'd think he'd have an old man body by now. I mean, maybe his body is slightly old manish compared to what he used to be when he was in his 20s, for sure. But you look at this guy next to most fighters in their 50s. You look at this guy next to most fighters even in their 30s. And he's built like a tank. It's crazy. So Ike Ibeabuchi had phenomenal genetics. I know it's not a bodybuilding contest, but I have to imagine a lot of that muscle is, natural muscle, eating his Nigerian diet and the genetics he's inherited from his ancestors and whatnot. But yeah, unfortunately, it's too late. He might not want to believe it's too late. Perhaps he's got, every man, or most men anyway, need goals in life in order to keep themselves on a straight and narrow mentally. We all need to strive for something. We all have to have some kind of goal, some kind of light at the end of the tunnel, something we're working towards. If not, we're like, I'm going to borrow a line from The Dark Knight, the Joker in The Dark Knight. We're like a dog without what does he say now? A dog chasing tires. I forget how he words it now. But yeah, men need goals. And maybe that's what it is for Ike Ibeabuchi. 26 years or 25 years in the big house, comes out. What's he supposed to do with his life? What's he supposed to do with his life? Wants to give it a go in boxing again. But he's going to get hurt. He was originally supposed to face Danny Williams this weekend rather than the individual he's fighting. I'm going to show you who he's fighting in a second. Danny Williams is actually the same age or a similar age to Ike Ibeabuchi, but Danny Williams has been active. So I haven't watched Danny Williams in many years, but you'd think being active, it'd give him a serious advantage over Ibeabuchi. Ibeabuchi, although aesthetically he looks very impressive, still, if you watch him hitting the pads, hitting the bag, in sparring, he looks terrible, which is what you would expect from a man of this age who's been out the ring for this long. He looks absolutely terrible. Hitting the bag, he throws like one punch every, 6-7 seconds. Occasionally you'll get a 1-2 out of him, and that's it. Man's got no energy to throw punches. The 1 or 2 shots he does throw are still fairly hard shots, but yeah, there's nothing there in terms of his energy. So check out this video if you haven't seen it. There's somebody that's actually time-stamped. If you scroll down in the comments of the video on Ibeabuchi's channel, there's somebody that's time-stamped the moment where he gets hurt by Ike Ibeabuchi. So click on the timestamp. So here we have Ibeabuchi. Interestingly, he's on the right side of this BoxRec Bout page. And normally on the right side, you have the underdog. So, or the underdog or the B side, right? Now, the individual he's going up against is a journeyman, Idris Afeni, also from Nigeria, late replacement, 40 years of age. He's actually coming off a string of wins. KO and TKO wins. And there you go. Ibeabuchi's last bout was on the 3rd of March, 1999. going up against Idris Afeni. They're going to need to be very, very careful with Ibeabuchi in this fight, if it's even a real fight. Because it's surely going to be in some obscure, venue somewhere in Lagos. It says there, okay, it's at a stadium. All right. The President's Return is what they're calling it. Is this guy turning up to just lay down, or is he turning up to actually try and win? That's the question. What do you guys think of this? Shout to Shane for the super chat. Big up, sir. No message on that one. Actually, my YouTube studio tab has crashed. It always does. Let me refresh this. Come on, YouTube studio. Where we at? There we go. Yes. Big up Shane for the super chat. Much appreciated. Big up Anthony YouTube in the place. Warren Williams says stadium fight. But what kind of stadium is it, Is it the equivalent of does the Vauxhall Conference still exist? Is it the equivalent of a Vauxhall Conference stadium somewhere in Lagos? Okay, Salimi's obviously trolling here. Mr. Granny says Jake Paul's next opponent. All right, so let's move on from Ike Ibeabuchi. Afro Soul, big up Afro Soul, he says, the first name is pronounced Ike. Yeah, that's right, actually. I did hear that in a recent video. I've been calling him Ike all these years, indeed. Because I saw a news report about this fight on Nigerian television, and they were calling him Ike Ibeabuchi. That's right, yes. But in boxing circles, people have been referring to him as Ike because it's spelt the same way for the longest time. But that's right. I just discovered that literally yesterday or the day before that it's EK. Thank you for reminding me. So, Artur Beterbiev, November 22nd card. Way down the bill. This is on the Benavidez card, right? Fighting this man, Dion Nicholson. Any of you guys heard of Dion Nicholson? This surely is just a run out for Artur Beterbiev. Shake off the ring rust. He is 40 years of age. He's coming off that first defeat of his professional career to Dimitri Bivol in their rematch. A lot of people are kind of puzzled as to why the trilogy match didn't happen right away as we thought it was going to. Some people are blaming Bivol. Any of you guys actually seen this man fight? Dion Nicholson. Yeah, I looked at Dion Nicholson's record. I'll go over it again here. I don't recall seeing anything on there. I mean, literally nobody. Just gonna have a look now quick. So I'm scrolling through. There is literally nobody on there. Other than Apochi, excuse me. The only time he fought somebody that you will know, he got knocked out at cruiserweight against Apochi. Remember the Nigerian fighter who fought Chev Clark on the same card as Martin Bakoli against Jared Anderson? Yeah, Okolie for Chev Clark on that card. It was a good fight. Okolie thought he was hard done by on the judges' scorecards. That guy is the only recognizable name on Dion Nicholson's record. Okolie, and he knocked Dion Nicholson out in 3 rounds, albeit at cruiserweight. So surely this is a pie for Artur Beterbiev, and he won't have any trouble whatsoever. Just going off the record, I mean, it can be different when you look at fight footage. Mark Hatch says, was nobody available in the top 10 for Beterbiev? Maybe they didn't want to make themselves available. Because what's the incentive to fight Beterbiev now? Are the Saudis going to pay a shed load of money to any of these contenders to fight Beterbiev in a non-title bout? Probably not. So what's their incentive? I don't think anyone's going to be rushing to fight Artur Beterbiev right now with no belt on the line. So yeah, I reckon they made themselves unavailable. My best guess. Anyway, moving on. We've talked about Miller versus Hunter. It's apparently off now. Michael Hunter has done an interview on Chris Mannix's channel calling Big Baby Miller a liar, saying that, for accusing him of pulling out of the fight. Michael Hunter denies this. He said he's never pulled out. He didn't pull out of the fight, excuse me. So we move on from that. I'm not sure how many of you guys saw this. Martin Bakoli did an interview 10 days ago. Maybe longer than that now. I can't remember when I took the screenshot. But anyway, he did an interview on Seconds Out in the Congo. And one of the most interesting things he said, obviously he's talking about sparring again and how he mashed up Usyk in sparring. We've all heard his sparring stories. And apparently the sparring stories aren't going to stop. But he said something interesting in this interview. He said that if he can't secure a big fight within the next year, he's going to retire. He's acted like he's been hard done by his whole career, not being able to secure big fights, which is simply not the case. The main person to blame for the way that Martin Bakoli's career has gone is Martin Bakoli. I say that because he's been with Billy Nelson all this time. And in my view, Billy Nelson has not done a good job in managing Martin Bakoli's career. He's not done a good job. Martin Bakoli would have been better off with a different manager, 258, somebody like that, Sam Jones even, rather than Billy Nelson. I don't think Billy Nelson's done a good job. As far as Billy Nelson as a trainer, there's only so much you can do with Martin Bakoli because he's clearly undisciplined. So I'm not really going to go in on Billy Nelson too much for his training abilities. But as a manager, I don't think he's done a good job. And Martin Bakoli talks about retiring if you don't get a big fight. Well, he had a big fight there against Efe Ajagba, which would have been a final eliminator originally after he beat Jared Anderson. All he had to do is stay in shape after the Anderson fight, go into the Ajagba fight, no fights in between, win it, and there you go, he's got his title shot, mandated by the IBF. But instead, he got totally out of shape. And then on the advice of his trainer-manager, Billy Nelson, he took a fight against Joseph Parker on like 2 days' notice. Jet-lagged, fat, basically no sleep, and got chinned in 2 rounds. Lost his status with the IBF, where he could have fought Ajagba for the mandatory slot. He went on to fight Ajagba anyway, but there was no mandatory position at stake or up for grabs in that fight because of the fact he'd lost to Joseph Parker. And the kind of terrible condition he allowed himself to get into after the Jared Anderson fight wasn't fully reversed by the time he fought Ajagba. He wasn't in the same kind of condition against Ajagba that he was in when he fought Jared Anderson. He was still the best part of 300 pounds. So Martin Bakoli had big fights there for him on a plate, but he was badly advised and he was poorly disciplined. So rather than looking around and blaming boxing politics, he needs to look in the mirror and he needs to look at Billy Nelson, in my opinion. That's where he's messed up. It's not somebody out there or people playing boxing politics or not giving him opportunities because of this, that, and the other. No. It's himself, and it's Billy Nelson. Like Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Yeah, the pair of them. So if he feels like he needs to retire within a year if he doesn't get a big fight, so be it. He says he'll concentrate on business ventures and what have you. What do you guys think about this? And also, the fact he's thinking about retiring within a year, it shows you where his mindset is at right now, doesn't it? It shows you that he's not really focused on boxing. The man's only about 32, 33, still relatively young for a heavyweight. And he's thinking about retirement. Maybe that 2 or 3 mil, whatever he got from Turkey for the last couple of fights, has taken any last bit of ambition he had left away. All right, so let's move on from Bakoli, saying he's going to retire within the next year if he can't secure a big fight. A few other bits and pieces here. This is kind of an old story now, but representatives of Alexander Usyk have said that under the right circumstances, Usyk would consider a fight with Deontay Wilder, but they didn't exactly specify what those circumstances would be. For me, the only circumstances that would be acceptable for this fight were if it was Usyk's last fight. There's a swan song. There's a little, a little dot on top of the I, across, atop the T. Because there's no credibility in the fight at this stage. There's nothing to gain from it as far as legacy. Unless you're talking about decades or centuries in the future when people look back and say, oh, he had Wilder on his record. The Wilder guy that had the trilogy with Fury, and okay, cool, he beat him too. But in this day and age, we know that it's not the same version of Wilder. And even if it was, I'd have Usyk beating Wilder all day long and 7 days a week and twice on Sunday. The only people that really want to see this fight at this stage are super duper casuals, the PBC cultists, the LDBC crowd, who apparently are still adamant that Deontay Wilder can beat Usyk, which is just bizarre to me. So yeah, if it was Alexander Usyk's last fight and he was taking on Wilder, I'd be okay with it as long as it's not for the titles. Because Deontay Wilder doesn't have a top 10, top 15 ranking right now, nor does he deserve one. So, couldn't be for the titles. The only other scenario where it's okay would be if it's like an exhibition match or something. Other than that, not something that I would support, endorse, embrace, condone. What do you guys think? Spark says, I prefer to see Wilder versus Jake Paul. Carlton Palmer says, do you see Usyk versus Moses as a realistic fight for next year? Personally, I think Itauma doesn't necessarily need, but I think it will be prudent for him to have at least 5 more fights before challenging Usyk if Usyk is still around. Yeah, 5 more fights. And I go back to what I said earlier on in the live stream. If you think 5 more fights is too much, Mike Tyson was 27-0 by the time his team put him in there against Trevor Berbick. 27-0. If Mike Tyson's team are waiting for him to be 27-0 before they put him in against Trevor Berbick, why should Itauma go in against Alexander Usyk, who is universes above Trevor Berbick in terms of ability, when Itauma's only 13-0? Do you know what I mean? So no, I think Itauma should have at least 5 more fights before they look at challenging Alexander Usyk. And 5 more fights is going to take him into 2027. I know people are very excited, but I don't see the rush at this stage. If Usyk is still around in 2027, Itauma can fight him then. Anyway, let's move on from this one. There's also been talk of Alexander Usyk fighting Jake Paul in MMA. Bizarre, right? Talks apparently behind the scenes. But I'm not sure that Jake Paul's even serious about all this stuff. I think the play from Jake Paul all along may have been to just have this exhibition bout with Gervonta Davis. But while he's finalizing that deal, because Jake Paul, remember, first and foremost, is a YouTuber. He's a content creator. This guy understands how to manipulate the algorithms. He understands how to court controversy. He understands how to garner public attention. He understands it better than most, if not all, boxers out there. He knows the game. So it wouldn't at all surprise me if Jake Paul was never at all serious about fighting AJ, never at all serious about fighting Alexander Usyk in MMA, never at all serious about fighting Canelo. But in order to generate publicity, he made those guys and their teams think he was serious. You see what I'm saying? Because if he didn't act serious behind the scenes with his manager Nikisa, then it would be easy for Eddie Hearn or whoever else to come out and say, this is just a publicity stunt by Jake Paul. He don't really want to fight Anthony Joshua. He don't really want to fight Usyk in MMA. He don't really want to fight Canelo Alvarez. It's a publicity stunt. But if he's actually got his manager and all these people negotiating behind the scenes, making these managers and promoters think he's serious, and then they're coming out in their interview saying, oh, he's actually serious. You see how that helps elevate his name and work those algorithms? Maybe that's what Jake Paul was doing all along, because he's been talking about fighting Canelo for the longest time. The fight has never come to fruition. Apparently last time it was very close, but it didn't happen. But was it really very close? Or was Jake Paul just stringing Canelo along? Do you know what I mean? It wouldn't surprise me if he was. Tony says Usyk is apparently a decent wrestler. Wouldn't doubt it. A lot of those Eastern European guys are. JR says, big up Hatman, I'm going to Kew Gardens on the weekend. I'm sure you mentioned before about Luke Partridge's birth certificate nearby. I can go and find it. Yes, go to the National Archives. Kew Gardens Tube Station, National Archives. It's about a 5-minute walk from there, 5-10 minute walk. It's clearly signposted. Go there and go to the births, deaths, and marriages department. Look up the year of Luke Partridge's birth, which was 88, was it? 86? I forget now. Big up Cali, he says, you have to look at a man's actions, not what comes out of his mouth. There's nothing I've seen from him that would make me believe he'd step in with AJ or Canelo. Indeed. So let's move on from any talk of Jake Paul fighting legitimate fighters. We'll finish off with something most of you guys are not going to be interested in at all, I'm afraid. But I thought it's worth a mention. Lawrence Okolie, over the past month or so, has called out the likes of Fabio Wardley and also Agit Kabayel. Nobody else is calling out Kabayel. There's several people that would like to fight Fabio Wardley for sure. They see how vulnerable he is in terms of technique, and they see how beatable he is, especially after the come-from-behind win against Justice Huni. But not the case with Kabayel. The only person that I am aware of, or that I can remember, to be calling out Agit Kabayel is Lawrence Okolie. He's the only guy. As boring as people might say he is, I have to respect the fact that he goes for the jugular. He was like this at cruiserweight. He didn't have to fight Chris Billam-Smith in a voluntary defense in his backyard. He did it anyway. And even on the rise up through the ranks before he became champion, he was targeting all his domestic rivals. He was trying to go the traditional route. Became champion, beat Krzysztof Glowacki, defended a few times, and then basically outgrew the weight class. To me, I do think he was legitimately drained by the time he fought CBS. I take nothing away from CBS, but yeah, Okolie looked drained to me. Moved up to Bridgerweight, fought that Polish guy in his backyard. The Polish guy wasn't really up to much, but, just chin Babichin around. Lucas Rozansky is the Polish guy I'm talking about. So Okolie dispatched of him in quick time. Moved up to heavyweight, fought some obscure fighter based in Germany, I think. Knocked him out in a round, and then in his last contest, he beat Kevin Lerena over 10 with a torn bicep, and he did actually have a torn bicep. It's not one of these, excuses with no receipts to back it up. Oh no, he produced the receipts. And you could even see in the ring, particularly after the fight, when he was in the corner, he was pointing to his bicep and his team were looking at it. And then the camera zooms in and you could see it was clearly displaced. It was a bad tear to the bicep. And that was the left bicep, right? So that basically took his jab out of commission. So when you factor all those things in, he didn't lose a round against Kevin Lerena. Maybe one round at best. Totally controlled the action. The clinching, it was here and there, but it wasn't anything too bad, especially not by Okolie's standards. And again, when you consider he was fighting one-handed, I thought his performance was all right. I think because he's put on so many stinking performances in the past, like against Isaac Chamberlain, like against Matt Yaskin, like against CBS, Chris Billam-Smith, those despicable performances have basically colored the perception of boxing fans moving forward, whereby if he clinches twice in a round, people start complaining. Do you know what I mean? It's like fans, because of how awful Okolie has been in the past with his performances, fans are now hypersensitive when they're looking at his fights. And I do think they were overly harsh on his last performance, on his last performance against Kevin Lerena. I didn't think the performance was that bad. I thought it was all right, especially given the fact he had a torn bicep. I thought the performance was serviceable. He was decent. It wasn't incredibly exciting, but under the circumstances, it was reasonable, in my opinion. So, yeah, Lawrence Okolie, even if you think of him as an octopus, as a guy who's not entertaining, he at least does go for the big challenges. He was willing to step in and fight Joseph Parker, remember. Martin Bakoli eventually got the fight, but Lawrence Okolie, who trains in Dubai, lives in Dubai, was willing to step in. And that, in retrospect, would have been a much better matchup, wouldn't it? Because at least Okolie would have been in some kind of shape. So, yeah, I credit Lawrence Okolie for being a guy who's willing to fight. I don't want to say anybody, because he did pull out of that Richard Riakporhe fight and didn't reschedule it. But apart from that, he's been willing to fight whoever. So I commend him on it. Tony says, I have the feeling Okolie may have got the better of Caballero in sparring. Hence, he keeps calling him out. Maybe. I haven't heard anything on that front. Mr. Grandy says, Caballero is decent, nothing special. Well, Caballero isn't like a special athlete, but what he does from a technical perspective is good. And the body punching is exceptional. We haven't seen body punching in the heavyweight division like this for quite some time. Ajit Caballero is a dedicated body puncher. And you can see how effective it is. Because heavyweights don't tend to get hit, at least in this era, as often in the body as fighters in lighter weight classes, you have to assume that they don't do as much conditioning as far as, sit-ups or whatever, as lighter guys do. Lighter guys tend to be fitter in general anyway, but yeah, the heavyweights, like Zhang, I can't imagine Zhang does a load of sit-ups. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't look like a guy that's really killing it with the crunches and the sit-ups and all that kind of... I doubt it. And probably similar with Makhmudov. I don't think these guys are killing it with the amount of sit-ups they're doing. And so they're not accustomed, particularly aggressive big punches like that. They're not accustomed to somebody going to their body. And so Ajit Caballero's coming in and he's giving him something that they ain't had before. Pause. Carlton Palmer says probably the best body puncher at heavyweight. Yeah, right now, for sure. Ajit Caballero's the best body puncher at heavyweight right now, for sure. Usyk is actually a good body puncher too. People don't actually talk about his body punching that much, but Usyk's a prolific body puncher too. Mac B says Ruiz loves sit-ups. James Clifford says, what happened to that rival of Okolie who hangs out with Madonna? He had potential but seems to have disappeared. And you're talking about Richard Riakporhe. Well, he was scheduled to fight Lawrence Okolie, but Okolie pulled out claiming an injury and the fight was never rescheduled. And yes, Riakporhe has drifted off into obscurity. Is Riakporhe still promoted by Ben Shalom? He had a fight since then, Richard Riakporhe, I think. But, yeah, he's got off into obscurity. Warren Williams says, has Ben got anyone left? Well, as it stands right now, as far as what's been released to the public, he's still got Ben Whitaker and he's still got Adam Azim. Lauren Price, is that her name? A female fighter, I think he's still got her. Is Caroline Dubois also? I think Caroline Dubois as well. Fraser Clark, he's got him. Or lucky Ben Shalom, he's got Fraser Clark. No disrespect. I think that's about it in terms of the names you will have heard of. Big phrase, that's right. Hold on a second, folks. I'm just replying a message. Carlton Palmer says they'll all be gone soon. So he reckons Ben Shalom's stable is about to desert him. Yep, Vidal left. That's right. Spoke about that earlier on in the stream. Vidal Riley posted on his social media that he's a free agent season. John Jay says the real body snatcher. That's right, Ajit Caballero, the real body snatcher. Real bad man. All right, so that about wraps it up. That's all the boxing news we got through. How long will we be streaming for? Definitely over 2.5 hours. Got through all the boxing news that I had lined up. Quite a backlog. Let's put a different graphic on screen. There you go. Real bad man. That's what Ike Ibeabuchi is with the body punches. Real bad man. So if there's anything else you guys want to talk about, now's the time to do it. Boxing related, obviously. That's a good question, Brandon. Who will AJ be fighting now that Paul is fighting Tank? So, I mentioned this earlier on the Pro Boxing Fans YouTube channel. They've just done an interview with a guy called Itauma, and he's claiming that Anthony Joshua versus Martin Bakoli is in the works. First Round Boxing says Big Baby versus Hunter on a Thursday. Not anymore, unfortunately. Big Baby and Hunter have both come out now and said the fight is off. In interviews today. They're both blaming each other. Ayed says, signing to Queensbury, apparently, Vidal Riley. Okay. Warren Williams says, what's real Badman off? That's Ninja Man. Ninja Man was, he's alive, he's in prison. A legendary Jamaican dancehall artist. And he was known for being a real bad man. That's why he's in prison. 23 baby mother, that's right. Real bad man. And I do recommend watching some of Ninja Man's scenes in movies. He's done a bit of acting because it is absolutely hilarious. There you go, Exactamundo. The original Don Dada, that's right. Hey, 23 baby mother, that's nothing compared to some of the other Jamaican dancehall and reggae artists. We've got way more kids than that. In fact, I saw an Instagram post the other day, which was going through like, you know, I forget how they described it, baby daddy rankings or however they described it on that post. Which Jamaican artist has got the most kids? And believe it or not, Ninja Man was nowhere near the top of the list. With 23. AJ says, why are all the Jamaican musicians in jail? Well, Vybz Kartel's out, right? Vybz Kartel got released from jail courtesy of King Charles. How does that even make sense? You guys know that, right? Vybz Kartel, a Jamaican dancehall artist whose music is all about violence and sex. That's basically all his music is about. He was in prison for an M, for a red rum. And the Privy Council intervened. Yes, the Privy Council of Great Britain, headed up by King Charles. They intervened and got him released. Why did King Charles get Vybz Kartel released? I still can't work it out. It's bizarre. Carlton Palmer says, must be a fan. There's no way that King Charles likes dancehall music. There's just no way. And if you go to Vybz Kartel's Instagram page, on his page, he's got, bear in mind he's Jamaican, right? But on his page, he's got the Union Jack, right? An emoji of the Union Jack. And it says, God save the king, or God bless the king. Yo, how weird is that? Mr. Grandy says, not all his music is about that though. Well, 99.9% of it. And it's pretty laughable if he's done any conscious tunes, because it's like the conscious tunes are cancelled out by all the slackness tunes. So I like a lot of Vibe Cartel music, you know, just for the entertainment of it. President Brush says, funny handshake squad. It surely must be. But then that would mean that Vibes Cartel is pretty high up in the funny handshake squad, or he's got people in his team that are high up in the funny handshake squad. You know? Because there are loads of people in the funny handshake squad who don't get saved by King Charles. You gotta be high up the funny handshake squad for that. King Charles literally got him out of prison for an M, a red rum. That's mad. Faultline says, what do you think about Itauma versus F.A. Ajagba next? It's a dangerous fight for Itauma, but a decent fight, as in I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think it's a risk worth taking. I think most people would agree that Hrgovic is the ideal next opponent. Hrgovic is very durable, but he's not a massive puncher. Ajagba is not as durable as Hrgovic, but he is a massive puncher. And I think he's added some strings to his bow over the past couple of fights. He showed back foot fighting ability, which I'd never seen from him before, in the Martin Bakoli fight. Shout out to Mac B. He says, Hatman, you killed that Crooklyn Dodgers beat on the lane. Good job, bro. Big up Mac B. Yeah, Hatman got bars. For any of you who haven't heard my music, click the link in the description. It's on Rumble, some of my old music. Back in the days when I was rapping. The Rumble channel's called The Bottomless Drink. Big up AJ. Shout out to Black Dynamite in the chat. He says, it's kind of funny how Eubank, who's been a gentleman his whole life, never been acknowledged by the Royals. But here you have Vibes Cartel getting a pardon. That's a great point. Eubank Sr., who's been kissing up to the Royals, who's basically been begging it as if he is a Royal or an aristocrat, who even now is talking about how his role model growing up was Queen Elizabeth II. And he gets no accolades. Nothing. Doesn't get knighted, doesn't get anything. But Vibes Cartel didn't get knighted or anything, but yeah, he gets something even better than being knighted. He gets released from prison and he's not even British. Man's Jamaican. And somehow although, you know, the head of state in Jamaica is still King Charles, right? So King Charles, by way of the Privy Council, intervened and got Vibes Cartel released. Madness. Big up 1-1 in the chat. AJ says, how does Charlie even have that power? And if the guy does another red rum, it won't be a good look. Well, the monarch is the head of state in Britain. The monarch has a lot more power than you've been led to believe, right? The Privy Council is something which the Prime Minister and various other senior politicians and high-ranking civil servants are part of. The Privy Council. And it's like, if you're going anywhere in politics, you're supposed to be part of this Privy Council. And when you join the Privy Council, apparently you have to like bend the knee in front of the king and like kiss his hand or something. That's what I've heard. Yeah, because there was kind of this scandal when Jeremy Corbyn was Labour leader, where he was refusing to join the Privy Council. I think he might have joined it in the end. But I think like he was refusing to join it because he didn't want to like kneel down and kiss the ring and all that. And in case you didn't know, under British law, the monarch has the right to veto certain government policies and what have you. Yes. People forget that Britain is not a true democracy. It's a constitutional monarchy. That is the actual true definition of what the British political system is. It's a constitutional monarchy. So, for the sake of public appearances, it's better for the political system to emphasize parliament and elected officials more than the power that the monarch has behind the scenes. Do you know what I mean? The monarch has a lot more power than people realize. There you go. Exactamundo said it. Charlie has that power. As a failsafe to protect the people, he can literally dissolve parliament. Although, when's the last time the monarchy actually did this? It's been a very long time, hasn't it? Decades or a century or more? I don't know. Shout out to Mr. Classic Metal. He says, the removal of the English and UK flags in public places to not offend certain people is weird. You won't see that happening in Japan, Malaysia, etc. I think it's being done to antagonize people deliberately. I think it's all divide and rule. It's all being done deliberately. That's my opinion. They want people of different ethnicities and religions and what have you at each other's throats so that the Keir Starlins of the world can get away with blue murder. While people are too busy fighting each other and, quarreling with each other, the government's doing all sorts of stuff behind your back when you're not paying attention. So I think that's what that's all about. Because, of course, there's no good reason why the English and UK flags should not be displayed in public places. It's absurd. Galaxy Edit says, when is Boxer's first card on the BBC going to be revealed? I'm not sure. I don't think Ben Shalom put a date on it or a timeline on it. He just kept saying soon. So make of that what you will. Shout out to 8 Franks. I'm not a fan of him either. Especially taking taxpayers' money for what? Ayad says it's meant to be 6 weeks away, apparently, the Boxer card. Is that right? Genius says, do you think there could be a civil war in Britain? No. A war with what? Sticks? Knives? Wouldn't be much of a war. Exactamundo says, after Whitaker bins Shalom off, who's going to headline it? Caroline Dubois? Probably. Caroline Dubois will probably go down a storm with BBC viewers. Truth be told. Shout out to Chili Beef. Big up, big up. What's good? It's all good. Since we've got Chili Beef in the house, what do you think about this PS5 price hike? I'm not sure if it's globally, but I think in the United States at least, they're raising the price of the PS5. Was it like 4 or 5 years after it came out? That's nasty work by Sony, right? Raising the price of the PS5. Because you have to imagine they're cheaper to make now. Because the new PS5s are smaller. They've got the slims in it. So they must be cheaper to make, but they want to charge more, hike the price up. Crazy work. It's because Xbox are falling out of the game. Monopolies are bad for the consumer. Look at the Zone. Do you know what I mean? Chili Beef says it's only in the US for now, and it's disgusting, especially as it's projected to shift another 40 million units. Oh, wow. Chili Beef says, no joke, Switch 1 prices have gone up as well. Yes, monopolies are very bad. Because they just do what they want. They just take the absolute biscuit. Andy P says, is the price hike something to do with tariffs? Ah, that's a good question. That's a good question. Is it something that it might be, you know? You might have actually solved it right there. It was staring us in the face. It might be the tariffs. The Trump tariffs, indeed. Cash says PS5 is the worst generation. I would concur. I would concur. AJ says maybe because they know people will buy them just for GTA 6, actually. Yeah, cynical business practices. Could be that as well. But the tariff thing, might be something to that. You know, tariffs on imported parts maybe, and, you know, components. Shout out to Josh for the super chat. He says, listen to latest entry, different wings, same bird. Guess you're talking about politics. I assume you are, unless you're talking about something else. Oh, on my Patreon you're talking about. Oh, yeah. Two wings of the same bird. Absolutely. Somebody with an unpronounceable name says, Xbox has been dead, but the next gen will have Steam on it. So that's basically going to be a Steam box then. They've already got Steam boxes. Steam boxes still exist, right? So you're saying the next gen Xbox is just going to be a Steam box with Xbox branding. Are they going to be as customizable as a Steam box? Because you can put different cards in a Steam box, can't you? Chili Beef says, after GTA 6 comes 100 euros and 90 quid games will be the norm. Indeed. Imagine that 90 quid games. We're already at 70 quid games. Let's be honest, GTA 6 could be 150 quid and still do gangbusters. That's how bad it is. And Rockstar milked GTA 5 for how many generations? Was it 3 generations they milked it for? Unbelievable. I know a lot of people love GTA, but I've never been a massive fan. I mean, in the early days of GTA, PS1, PS2 era, yeah, I really liked it. But beyond that, I was never really a massive fan, to be honest. It's like, they're technically very impressive games because of just the size of the open world and the detail and the interactability. Is that even a word? So they're impressive from a technical perspective. But I don't really find the characters to be that engaging. They're kind of like dreamed up from the mind of a teenage boy. You know? Those characters are like from the imagination of a teenage boy. They're not that interesting to me. In GTA 5, you had Franklin, Michael, and who's the crazy one? forget the name of the crazy one, but the characters weren't that engaging to me. The story weren't that engaging. Trevor. Thank you, Trevor. And I consider myself to be a relatively casual gamer, but I guess you could put me in the category of a hardcore casual. The real casuals are the ones who basically just play FIFA and GTA and that's it. And maybe a bit of Gran Turismo or something, you know? Forza if they've got an Xbox. And Call of Duty, I forgot that. Yeah, so the super casuals play Call of Duty, GTA, FIFA. And that's it. Maybe a bit of 2K or something on top of that. Yeah, COD. Black Dynamite, you're talking about Saints Row. Saints Row, was that a GTA competitor? It basically, Saints Row is like GTA, was like a slapstick version of GTA. But when Saints Row first came out, GTA hadn't gone as slapstick as it later went on to be, if that makes sense. So, for example, in GTA 5, they've got like aliens in it. You know? Although you could say that's a hallucination, but there's a part in GTA 5 where you're like battling aliens. So that's the kind of thing that Saints Row had in it from the beginning. So it basically took the GTA formula but made it absurd, like totally absurd. Yeah, it was like more ridiculous basically than GTA. But GTA now is pretty damn ridiculous itself. So especially when you start doing all the side missions, they're all ridiculous. Which has kind of made Saints Row obsolete. Yeah, that's right, Chili Beef. GTA is very carefully designed to cater to hardcore casual FIFA COD crowd. They cover all bases, very meticulously designed. GTA is basically a pop culture game. That's the way I describe GTA. GTA is a game that is designed for pop culture consumers. Because it's full of pop culture references all the way through, and you know. GTA is almost like a snapshot of the zeitgeist of the time, like the pop culture zeitgeist of any given time. That's what they try and capture, you know. The current zeitgeist in pop culture is what they put in GTA games. Verbal Glock says, Saints Row was like MySpace, then Facebook came around. Josh says, Red Dead 2 was the last good game I enjoyed. I like Red Dead 2 a lot better than GTA. But I don't know, I still wasn't a massive fan of Red Dead 2. You know, again, for me, more enjoyable than GTA, but it's not one of my favorite games of all time. Let's just put it that way. All I can tell you about not just Red Dead, but most Rockstar games, or certainly like the big open world games, is they are, from a technical perspective, phenomenal. You know? GTA 5, when it came out, just the size of the open world and the attention to detail and all that, and the graphics for an open world game, phenomenal. Same with Red Dead. Absolutely breathtaking graphics and all that, especially for an open world game. Black Dynamite says, have you played Ghost of Tsushima? I've actually got that game, but I never really got into it. I played like, I don't know, 2 hours and never went back to it. Have I ever played Bully? No, I've never played that. Cash says God of War 2018 was really good. It was cool. I personally prefer the old format God of Wars, you know, like God of War 2, God of War 3. The new format where they've got Kratos a lot closer to the camera, like Ruiz. You know, Ruiz, Son of Rome, that came out at the start of the Xbox. What was the name of the console that came out at the same time as the PS4? I forgot which one it is now. But yeah, from that perspective, I prefer the old style perspective. Xbox One. Okay, Xbox One. I played the original Metal Gear Black Dynamite. I clocked the original Metal Gear on PS1. And I don't think I ever played the Metal Gears in between. If I did, it would have been at a friend's house and only very briefly. The next Metal Gear I played was Metal Gear Solid 4 on a PS3. And I clocked that game as well. But the most recent one, I just, didn't really do it for me. I played a little bit of it and just put it down. It seems a bit dated somehow, you know, like the animations and everything. I guess they're still using the same game engine, just reskinned it with higher quality textures and assets, but I don't know, it just seems dated somehow. Yeah, the intro to Metal Gear Solid 5 was good. Yeah, that's right. It was very good. It was very engaging. But once you get into like the proper open world, it just lost me somehow, you know? But yeah, the start of Metal Gear Solid 5 was actually really strong. Yeah, I agree with that. But the last Metal Gear Solid game that I actually completed was Metal Gear Solid 4. It was on a PS3. First Round Boxing says, I'm a casual, but LA Noire is the most genius video game ever made from a story perspective. Have you played the Uncharted games? The Uncharted games blow LA Noire out of the water for story, at least from a action story perspective, you know? Because they had a very, very strong character in Nathan Drake. Very, very strong character. Encircled says, Uncharted is trash. You must be crazy. Uncharted is one of the greatest games of all time, especially Uncharted 2. Uncharted 2, one of the best games I ever played in my life. Blew my mind. I'd never seen a game like that before in terms of, you know, the story, the action, the set pieces, the banter between the characters. I never played nothing like that before. You must be out your mind, Encircled. You're definitely in the minority thinking that Uncharted is trash. Uncharted is goated. Uncharted 2 is literally my favorite video game of all time. The way that game opens with Nathan Drake hanging out of the train, and I mean that whole crazy. And I love the way that in Uncharted 2 you're just thrust into the middle of like this disaster situation and you've got no idea what's going on. And the story and the plot is slowly revealed to you through like the first hour of the game. Do you know what I mean? And I love all the twists and the turns in Uncharted 2 where you don't know where the story is going, and yeah, loved it. Loved Uncharted 2. I liked Uncharted 2 so much that every level I got to, I was praying the game would never end. I was like, please let this game, I don't even want to get to the end where they find the Chitamani stone. I want this game to go on forever. Because this story, the characters, the banter, the twists and the turns, the supernatural element, which is like a twist in the story, all of that stuff, loved it. And Uncharted 2 has got to be one of the highest rated PlayStation exclusives of all time. I know it's no longer a PlayStation exclusive, is it? Isn't it on PC now? But Uncharted 2, that's still got to be one of the highest rated PlayStation exclusives of all time. On Metacritic or whatever. Yeah, I played Red Dead 1. That was a great game when it came out. But I've never seen a game, just in terms of like action adventure, that could match Uncharted for storytelling. Uncharted 2 anyway. For storytelling and character. I've never seen, even now, I haven't seen anything like it that can match it for the storytelling and whatnot. NW10 says, I met Don Charles outside a cafe in my area a couple of days ago. Okay, what did he say? I agree with Black Dynamite. PS3 was the best generation. They even had unique games like Heavy Rain. Indeed, yeah. For PlayStation, I would say it was the best generation, yeah. People might disagree in terms of third-party games, but for me, for PlayStation exclusives, the PS3 generation was the best. Exactamundo, yeah, they made an Uncharted movie, that's right, yeah. Ayad says Xbox 360 for exclusives. 360 exclusives were trash, bro. I had a 360, but 360 exclusives were trash. They're trash. Gears of War was like, you know. Halo was, Alan Wake, you know, it's like, the only advantage of having a 360 was that a lot of the multi-platform games were developed on the 360 as the primary console. So the 360 usually got the superior version. Yeah. A lot of multi-platform games would run better on a 360. And the online service was better than the PlayStation service. But in terms of exclusives, PlayStation blew the 360 out of the water in terms of exclusives. And I had both consoles, but exclusives on 360 were trash. Indeed. There you go. Chili Beef laid it out. God of War 3, Uncharted, Metal Gear Solid 4, The Last of Us wasn't even close. It wasn't even close. Kyle says, overall, the 360 was the greatest console. No way. No way. You know, when the original Xbox came out, it was at the forefront of online gaming. So Microsoft were kind of ahead of Sony in that aspect, you know, ahead of the curve in that aspect. So they had an advantage in terms of the online for a while. And a lot of people gravitated towards them because of that, competitive online multiplayer and all that kind of thing. In the early days of Xbox, people preferred the controller as well. It was more ergonomic and everything, although the original Xbox controller was ginormous, bro. The original Xbox controller was damn near half the size of the console. It's huge. But the actual games, like exclusives, the Microsoft exclusives are not good, bro. People say Forza, okay, if you're into racing games, but Halo was never that good. I mean, at the time when it came out, okay, because of the multiplayer thing. But once COD came out, Halo's irrelevant after COD, really. And COD's a multi-platform game. And Gears of War was never that good either, you know? Gears of War, hiding behind covers, just, nah. I never really got the Gears of War thing. Ayed says the only Halo I liked was Reach. Was that even made by the same developer as the original Halo? Because the developer changed, didn't it? Oh, okay, so it was the last one that Bungie made, okay. Because who took over? Because then Bungie started making Destiny, right? 343 Studios. Okay, yeah. So basically, Destiny was just Halo reskinned, repackaged. That's basically what Destiny is. I think you're nitpicking in Circle, to be honest, because to me, they're very similar games. Destiny is basically the spiritual successor of Halo. That's what it is. Made by the same studio. It's a spiritual successor. And it plays very similar to Halo. Not really aiming, hip firing and all that kind of stuff, floating around in the air and shooting. And it's very similar. Say it's nothing like Halo. No, that's a stretch. It's a lot like Halo. Yeah, you can say, but I'm talking about the way it plays. Never mind it being a loot shooter and an arena shooter and all that. It plays, the aesthetics are like Halo. It feels like Halo when you're playing it, a lot like it. Yeah, they just repackaged it and expanded it out, and it's just Halo. No. I can see you're a big Halo fan, but no. It's just Halo, bro. It's where they were always going to take Halo once the hardware allowed for it. And COD and Halo are comparable because of the popularity. That's what I was comparing them for. Not to say that they play the same. What I'm telling you is Halo was never that good. People used to play Halo because Xbox was at the forefront of online competitive multiplayer. And they brought out this thing, Halo, with Master Chief. They didn't have much competition, that's what I'm saying. That's why Halo became so, because there was no real competition for them at the time in terms of first-person online multiplayers, right? But when COD came out, like COD 4, Halo was finished at that point. Finished. Halo was finished at that point. Once COD 4 came out, it was done. No one cared about Halo after that. The experience that Activision and what's the name of them now? I forget the name of them. That made the Modern Warfare game, the developer. Not the Activision's the publisher. What's the developer now that made COD 4 and Modern Warfare 2 and why have I forgotten their name? Infinity Ward, thank you, Infinity Ward. What Infinity Ward crafted with COD 4 was a game changer. Simple as that. It was a game changer. Yeah? Never mind Eddie Hearn talking about the game change. No. Infinity Ward changed the game. They changed online multiplayer. After that, nobody cared about Halo, bro. Let's just be real. Because people were like, wow, what's this COD 4 game? And Circle says Halo Reach actually outsold COD 4 and Xbox. Yeah, on one platform. Did it outsell Modern Warfare 2? Did any of the... Because we're talking about the time, the point when the game changed. After COD 4, nobody cared about Halo anymore. Because after COD 4, you had Black Ops. No, it wasn't Black Ops. What came after COD 4? After COD 4 was... what was the name of the game that came after COD 4? The Treyarch one. World at War. And then Modern Warfare 2. No, there's no way that it was very close to Modern Warfare 2 in terms of sales. Cross-platform, no way. No, not even close. Modern Warfare 2 vastly outsold it, and it's been outselling it ever since. Yeah, because of nostalgia, and by that time, Halo had built up a following of people. But look what happened since COD 4 came out. Look at the trajectory of Halo since COD 4 came out. This is the point I'm trying to make to you. Halo has gone down ever since COD 4 came out, right? The general trend is Halo has become less popular. As COD became more popular, with each subsequent game, Halo became less popular. It's facts. The more popular COD became, the less popular Halo became. Nobody cared. And it was that moment when COD 4 dropped. COD 4 changed everything. COD 4 changed everything. Yeah, I mean, during those early 2010, 2011, well, Modern Warfare 2 came out 2009. So that was the time when we had the rise of these huge COD YouTubers, you know, X-Jaws and Only Use Me Blade and Wings of Redemption and all those guys. Back in those days, you even had like El Presador and people like that. And many, many, many others. What was the other guy called? White Boy something? 7th Street? I can't remember his name. But there were so many of these big YouTubers all playing COD. And COD took over the YouTube gaming space, if we can describe it that way. You know, Woody's Gamer Tag, he's another one, that's right. Yeah. Call of Duty took over the YouTube gaming space completely. I mean, totally. For a good few years there. It just completely took over. I mean, people used to queue up every year. Can you imagine? Every year, because they're bringing a COD game out every year. People used to queue up for the midnight launch. You know, and it weren't just nerds, because some games, it's only going to be nerds queuing up. But for COD, there was all shapes and sizes, bro. The man them were queuing up for COD at midnight, you know? Arco says, yeah, I knew guys at school who always pulled sickies on COD release day. I got accosted by teenagers one time outside of the supermarket, maybe a couple of times, asking me to buy COD for them, you know, on release day. Because they were getting ID, and they're like, oh, you're not old enough. Yeah. Shout out to Chris Lees. Yeah, Chris Smooth was hilarious. He did some of my favorite COD videos on Modern Warfare 2. He had his Chris Smooth is Waiting on a Noob song. Chris Smooth is waiting on a noob. Waiting on a noob. And the way he was trolling people with his camping, madness. My favorite Call of Duties were Modern Warfare 2, even though it's the most casual COD ever. I had the most fun with it. Modern Warfare 2 and Black Ops 2. And you can guess why I like Black Ops 2 as well as Modern Warfare 2, because those games are very similar. Modern Warfare 2 is more, they had more BS in it. You know, like the noob tubes with the one-man army. Had all kind of BS in it like that. You can have 2 primary weapons, and yeah, there was a lot of BS in it. But it was so fun, Modern Warfare 2. It was so fun. But I did like Black Ops 2 as well. Yeah, I like that boat level. You know, when you're on that yacht. I like Black Ops 2. A couple of men saying COD is not a casual game. Of course it's a casual game. COD's as casual as it gets. There's nothing more casual than COD, bro. COD is the most casual game. But that's all right. Marley says, Modern Warfare, World at War, and Modern Warfare 2 for me. I guess in that order. Yeah, I like Modern Warfare as well, but I was just getting back into gaming at the time, so I found Modern Warfare 2 more casual friendly. Because I was basically starting from scratch, knocking rocks together as like a Stone Age caveman, because I pretty much skipped the PS2 generation. I hadn't played first-person shooters before. The first-person shooter I ever played was World at War. I only played that for a couple months, and then Modern Warfare 2 dropped. And I just did not know how to control a first-person video game. So, yeah, when I was going back and forth, because, I played World at War, then I played COD 4, and then Modern Warfare 2 came out, and I found Modern Warfare 2 just more noob-friendly because of the, again, one-man army, noob tubes, and all the other BS that was in it, which made it very accessible to people like myself that had no skill. Arco says, I always found COD to be sweaty as well, it is now, yeah. But in the Modern Warfare 2 days, I can assure you, it was absolutely a wash with casuals, bro. Lobbies were just totally casual. And now COD is sweaty because of skill-based matchmaking. Back then, if skill-based matchmaking existed, it was very minimal. Yeah, because normally, in the Modern Warfare 2 days, you'd be in lobbies with just pure noobs. Especially around Christmas time. It was just noobsville everywhere. It was much easier to get, good scores in those days when because they didn't have skill-based matchmaking. Whereas that's the reason I stopped playing COD. Well, one of the reasons is because the skill-based matchmaking is just ridiculous. As soon as you string together a few decent games, they throw you in there in the sweatiest lobbies on earth, where people are using all kind of modded controllers and God knows what else, you know? So yeah, the skill-based matchmaking is horrible. That's right, Arco. Man who haven't showered in weeks. They weren't like that back in the days. Back in the days, there were plenty of good. Most lobbies were good. And if you got into a sweaty lobby, you'd leave quick. You drop out of that lobby quick, fast. And Circle says a sweaty lobby was good from time to time, only if you're a good player. If you're a rubbish player like me, it's never good. Circle says it's like hard sparring, you need it. Only if you have the ability to get good. I never had the ability to be good, so it was never good for me. Every sweaty lobby I go into, no matter how hard I tried, I'd always just get totally owned and end up with like, you know, a negative KD of like 10. I'm like, to hell with this. Where the noobs at? Hey, it says, didn't you like Killzone Hatman? Killzone 3 is my favorite first-person online shooter of all time. Killzone 3. Loved it. Killzone 3 online multiplayer. Absolutely flipping loved it. Liked it better than COD, better than any first-person shooter I played online, better than Killzone 2. And that's kind of sacrilegious to say in the little Killzone community, because like Killzone 3 was seen as a more casual game than Killzone 2. Killzone 2 online was like one of the first, or one of the few, should I say, console online first-person shooters that had server browsers. Yeah, Killzone 2 had server browsers, you know? Obviously, every online shooter has got server browsers now, but back then, it was rare. So Killzone 2 was more like a nerdy, more difficult game than Killzone 3. Huge maps, very few small maps, and it was just very technical. Whereas Killzone 3, they stripped it down, they refined it, the controls were better, the maps were smaller for the most part, and they just nailed it. They absolutely nailed it. I loved Killzone 3. There'll never be a multiplayer that I enjoyed more than Killzone 3 multiplayer. It was amazing. Really underrated Killzone 3 online multiplayer. What followed it was Killzone Shadowfall, which was average at best. Unfortunately, that was a big disappointment. Shadowfall, nowhere near as good as Killzone 3 online, but Killzone 3 was actually ahead of its time in terms of some of the game modes. Other bigger games like COD actually adopted some of the game modes from Killzone 3, yeah, and some of the other more popular first-person shooters also adopted game modes from Killzone 3. So it was ahead of its time in many ways, and definitely my favorite FPS ever online. Now, I like Killzone 3 more than Killzone 2 because the controls were more responsive, for one. And I think they refined. My favorite map on Killzone 3 multiplayer was the oil rig. Remember the oil rig map? Oh, I used to mash people up on the oil rig map. That's some amazing gameplays on there, on that oil rig map. And I also like the melee, yeah? Killzone was ahead of its time with melees as well, because Killzone, you could melee people by stabbing them in the face, slitting their throat, or you could actually gouge their eyes out. You remember that melee where you gouge their eyes out? John Fury style? Killzone was ahead of its time with the melee action. You run up on a man and like gouge his eyes out. And they also had mechs. Yeah? Killzone 3 had mechs. Killzone 2 never had mechs in multiplayer. So, you know, they had jetpacks on some levels, mechs on certain levels as well. you know? See, I did like Killzone 3. Yeah, I played Gears of War. Never liked Gears of War. Never liked it. Always felt clunky and just, never liked it. Yeah, I played SOCOM. It had like 130 players or something. That was really its selling point, right? It had a gazillion players. Big up Rip It for the super chat. He says, what made you get into boxing? Been watching you since I was 13 years old. Big fan. Big up S Rip It. What made me get into boxing was Muhammad Ali. So I grew up in the 1980s and I had, my dad and also an uncle who used to tell me stories about Muhammad Ali because I was too young to remember when Ali was still fighting. So as a kid growing up in the 80s, they'd tell me, I'd heard conversations about Ali, this, that, and because this is right after the Ali era, right? Talking about early 80s. And Ali's last fight was in 1980 against Trevor Berbick. So he was still very much in the public consciousness. And so I started asking questions because, especially when Mike Tyson came on the scene, you know what old heads are like. Oh, he wouldn't have beaten Ali. He's nothing compared to Ali. You know, the rose-tinted glasses thing. And I thought Mike Tyson was the best thing since sliced bread. So I was like, okay, who's this Ali guy? And they showed me videotapes of Muhammad Ali. And I was blown away by his personality. Because as a kid, I was massively into WWF, as it was then, right? Boxers didn't have the kind of personality that my favorite wrestlers had until I saw Muhammad Ali. I was like, wow, this guy's like one of the wrestlers. You know, with the way he behaves, the shouting and screaming and all that type of stuff. This is right up my street. So when I saw Muhammad Ali, I became infatuated. I was watching Ali documentaries and, you know, people would get me Ali books. I was watching his fights. And I thought I was Muhammad Ali as a young boy. Do you know what I mean? I literally thought I was Muhammad Ali. So yeah, it was really Muhammad Ali that got me into boxing. Hearing family members talk about him, and then once I saw him, because I'd seen boxing before I'd watched Muhammad Ali, you know, it was boxing on television and Mike Tyson was around and stuff like that, but it was the personality of Ali that drew me in because I was such a big wrestling fan. At the time of, you know, Hulk Hogan and all that. The Ultimate Warrior. And Circle says, I don't think it was SOCOM. Was SOCOM like from a bird's eye view? Which was the game that had like 100, I'm not talking about Resistance. Resistance had a lot of players, but there was another shooter in that PS3 generation that had like 100 players. Maybe SOCOM's the top-down shooter, right? The tactical shooter. I know the one you're talking about. I played that as well. But there was another one, which I'm getting it mixed up with, which had like 100 players on. I can't remember where it is. I can't remember which one it is. Anyone know? There was a game, PS3 generation, that at the time I think it had more players than any other online multiplayer game. MAG, that was it. Thank you, Arko. Yes, it was MAG. That's the one I was thinking of. There you go. 256 players. I was thinking of MAG. But I definitely played SOCOM as well. Maybe once or twice or something like that. I definitely played it. Because those games were out around the same time, like around the same generation or whatever. I definitely played SOCOM as well, but I was never really into it, evidently, because I'm mixing it up with MAG. Yeah, MAG had some crazy number of players. There was MAG that had like 256 players, and Resistance was it Resistance 2 that also had a lot of players? It wasn't as many as Mag. Was it Resistance 1 or 2 that had the most players out of those two games? I forget now. I mean, it's all subjective at the end of the day, but you're very much in a minority in circles saying Uncharted aren't good games. Uncharted games, Uncharted 2 specifically, amazing. Absolutely amazing. And the vast majority of people who play them feel that way. Not just casual gamers, hardcores alike. And Elden Ring, well, I've never played Elden Ring, but it's loved by hardcore gamers. I would say more than, I mean, I'm surprised that Elden Ring's so popular because From Software games are not casual games. So I'm surprised, as difficult as From Software games are, I'm actually quite surprised that Elden Ring became the phenomenal success that it is. Shout out to Copezilla. Do I still play video games? Very rarely. Afro Soul says, Uncharted are a bit overhyped for me. I was the PlayStation guy who thought Gears of War was a much better series. Better series how? Gears of War? A better series than Uncharted? Now you are buzzing. Absolutely buzzing. I mean, what story does Gears of War have that can compare to the Uncharted stories? Uncharted stories had everything. There was, spycraft and intrigue, the occult, the supernatural, ancient mysteries. There was literally, there was everything in the Uncharted stories. And you're saying Gears of War? I mean, maybe for the online multiplayer, okay. Uncharted is not really primarily about the online multiplayer, although the online multiplayer in Uncharted 2 is pretty good. So if you're saying Gears of War is better for that, okay, but for story, no, you got to be buzzing. You have got to be buzzing. Yeah, Uncharted's not really about the online thing. Uncharted's more so about the story mode. That's what it's about. It's story mode. And the puzzles. I like the puzzles in the Uncharted games. Especially Uncharted 2. Lehman Chain says, Hatman, do you think it's safe for Chisora to be among the general public on media duty with his current neurological state? I'm not sure it's been safe for him to be around the public in any neurological state, to be honest. He's less wild now than he used to be. He's less wild now than he used to be. Shout out to Copezilla. It says, Uncharted was good. It took you all over the world. Indeed. And I've always been somebody that's into stuff like that, Ancient mysteries and going all over the world, different environments. And it was really the characters that were the main focus in Uncharted, Nathan Drake is just an iconic character. Funny, banter, an engaging voice. And that's the thing that really separated PlayStation exclusives from Xbox exclusives, is that Sony just does characters better. For the most part. Like Kratos. Do you know what I mean? Nathan Drake. Joel. Like, the characters that Sony create are just more memorable and more iconic than Microsoft character. I mean, Master Chief. How is he even a character? You know? Oh, man. Sony are just better at creating iconic characters. Well, they used to be. Don't know about now, but back then. The tag team, if you want to call them that, of Ellie and Joel in the Last of Us games. Well, the first game. Yeah, Sully and Nathan Drake were both extremely likable characters. Yeah. Both extremely likable characters. The banter between Sully and Drake, especially in Uncharted 2, was classic. I mean, Bill. Indeed, yeah, Bill was another character. That's right, in The Last of Us. But Joel, right? The opening of The Last of Us, the first game, the opening 15 minutes, the prologue. That's one of the most memorable prologues in gaming of all time. Do you know what I mean? One of the most memorable openings to a game ever was that like first 15 minutes of the game. It was like, damn. Yes, that's right, Copezilla. He says, I love Uncharted. They would just say right off wherever then you'll be in a plane in a different part of the world. Yeah, I loved all the globe trotting. Shout out to S. Rippet. He says, if you could match any two fighters from different eras, who would you put in the ring and why? I'd like to put Mike Tyson in there against Usyk, prime for prime, to see how Mike Tyson deals with a southpaw of Usyk's level, and to see how Usyk deals with a pressure fighter of Mike Tyson's level, because neither guy faced anything like each other, not even close. With Mike Tyson, you're not going to beat him unless you beat the fight out of him. You're not going to finesse him. You're going to have to actually beat the fight out of him. Could Usyk do that? Usyk can fight on the inside. Could he fight on the inside well enough to beat a prime Mike Tyson? I don't know. It's an intriguing fight for me. So I'd love to have that fantasy matchup. You know, if we have the time machine, go back, get the prime Usyk, get the prime Tyson, match them against each other. But there are so many other matchups, you know. I would have loved to have seen Floyd Mayweather fight Tommy Hearns, prime for prime. That's an intriguing matchup. I think Hearns would win. We put that TBE to the test. Man calls himself the best ever. Well, put it to the test. Shout out to S. Rippet. He says, was Tyson overrated? I always say this, but I think it's an important point to make every time. People use the term overrated differently. Okay, so when I say that somebody is overrated, I'm not saying they're rubbish. When I say overrated, I'm just saying they're not as good as the general consensus would have you believe. And therefore, with many popular fighters, you could say they were overrated. Mike Tyson included. So yes, he was overrated in the sense that, you get his fans coming out saying, if he'd stuck with Kevin Rooney, he would have gone 100-0, like John Fury. I don't buy that. You get his fans saying that he would have knocked everyone out in the first round, in his prime. I don't buy that either. And when I say everyone, I'm talking about the version of Mike Tyson who fought Michael Spinks. His fans will claim that that version of Mike Tyson would have just destroyed any heavyweight in history on that particular night. I don't buy it. So I would say he's overrated in the sense that his fans go overboard with how highly they rate him. But he was still a very, very formidable fighter. He was a prodigy. He had a very unusual set of physical abilities. He wasn't just some swarmer. There was a lot of skill on the front foot. He was an accurate puncher, a hard puncher, explosive, fast, moved his head, had very good foot work and foot movement for a pressure fighter. Could punch with both hands from any angle, uppercuts, hooks, straight shots. He had a great chin. And he was ferocious. He was a tremendous finisher. So he's a very, very talented fighter. But yeah, overall overrated because people tend to go overboard. But that doesn't mean he wasn't good. He was a great fighter, actually. So shout out to S. Rippit for the super chat. Josh Letty says, Hatman, have you watched Nicolino Loche before? I have, but not much. I think somebody actually mentioned him a few months ago on a live stream. And I went to go and watch a couple of his fights after that, but I haven't seen much of him. Shout out to Josh Letty. Is there any of his fights that you recommend me watching? JR says Tyson's chin is underrated. It really is. He had a great chin. A great chin. Yeah, Chili Beef is bang on there with the Tomb Raider Uncharted comparison. Uncharted is more of an action game than Tomb Raider. And Uncharted is far more story-driven. Yeah? Far more story and character-driven. Tomb Raider was just like Lara Croft with big boobs and pom-pom shorts. And young teenage boys got excited. There was no real character-driven anything in Tomb Raider. Do you know what I mean? That was it. The whole appeal was like, oh, wow, teenage boys, this Lara Croft character in a video game with really low resolution, a sprite at the time with big boobs. Oh, this is amazing. Uncharted had fully fleshed out characters and it was story and character driven. So it was different in that sense. Yeah, and that's kind of the irony of it, right? The newer Tomb Raider games are more character driven because they've tried to take a leaf out of the Uncharted book. That's the way that Tomb Raider tried to reinvent itself. It's like because when Uncharted came out, there was right away the Tomb Raider comparisons because of, going into ancient places and ancient artifacts and exploring. So there was that comparison. But really, Uncharted just blew Tomb Raider out of the water in terms of what it did. So Tomb Raider realized that and they said, okay, we better start copying Uncharted then. So when they reinvented Tomb Raider, yeah, they took a lot of what Uncharted was doing and used it for themselves. A shout out to S. Rippet. He says, what advice do you wish someone told you at 20? The advice that I wish someone told me at 20 would have had to have been a time traveler. Because the advice I would have said is wait until crypto comes out. There's going to be something called Bitcoin. And when this Bitcoin thing comes out, every last bit of money that you have, when it launches, you're to spend it on Bitcoin. That's what the advice would be. Spend it on Bitcoin, bro. If only, Chris Lee, there you go. If only. Spend it on Bitcoin. Yeah, spend it on Bitcoin. I'd literally be sitting here as a multi-millionaire. There was, you say it hurts, man, but wasn't there a guy that bought a pizza with like 20 Bitcoin or something? Any of you guys know about this? There was a guy who had some Bitcoin in the very early days and thought Bitcoin weren't going to go anywhere. And so he bought like a couple of pizzas with all his Bitcoins. 500 Bitcoin. Man had like 500 Bitcoin. And he used them to buy pizza. Yo. Yo. Now that really hurts, bro. Huh? Man had 500 Bitcoin. And he spent them all on pizza. There you go. That's what the story was called. Most expensive pizza in history. Yo. That's wild, bro. That is such a madness. He spent 500 Bitcoin on a pizza. Yeah, he'll never forget that meal. He'll never forget that meal, bro. Exactamundo says 100% he was American. Oh, that's a madness. Brandon says, where's the real bad man from? He's from Jamaica. That's Ninja Man. Real bad man. Josh says, I bet he got a margarita as well. He probably got it the day after a drink up, you know? A sesh with his friends drinking and smoking, or maybe during the sesh. And they run out of money because they spent the money on weed. Probably a stoner or something. He's like, I got all this Bitcoin. Oh, you ain't going to use that. But it ain't going to go nowhere. His friends probably talked him into it. He's like, yeah, you're right. Let me get rid of this rubbish Bitcoin stuff. In fact, they thought it was a good idea. Of course. They thought it was a good idea. They were like, oh, I can use the Bitcoin I've got to buy pizza. They were probably telling them that he was the man. You know what I mean? Then their sesh can continue. They've all got the munchies. Oh, for real? Josh says that pizza was bought by the guys that created Bitcoin. Well, the guy that created Bitcoin is unknown, isn't it? At least officially. Exactamundo says, some guy who looked and talked like Jesse Pinkman, no doubt. Yeah, I'm just imagining some stoners. You know, like middle American stoners. Big up Crazy Pickney. Some like 20-something middle America stoners or late teens. Monging out. Got the munchies. Everyone's broke. Man, use this Bitcoin. All right, peeps. Gonna shut this one down. Must have been streaming for what, 4 hours? What are we on now? There we are. Nearly 4 hours, yeah. All right, so we're gonna shut this one down. I'd like to thank each and every one of you, as always, for joining the conversation. And a special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They were S. Rippet, Josh Leddy, Copezilla, Mr. Classic Metal, James Clifford, Shane Hornby, HC, Suited and Booted, Mr. Luca Bobs, Gaz, Matt Borgerson, of course, Green Entity, Ibrahim, and I think that's it. Yep, so special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. Big up everyone else as well. Until next time, take care. Be good. I'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.